I rushed out of my house as fast as my legs would carry me. Taking short, quick steps, I ran down the stairs of my porch. I was trying to run for the grassy area, but I knew that I wasn't going to make it. By the time I reached the sidewalk, there was no holding back. It was coming out fast and hard, and I was left with no choice. So, I stopped where I was, bent over, and placed my hands on my knees for leverage. Then I violently vomited. It wasn't just the Whopper and the fries that lay there on the pavement, nor was it the milkshake. There was so much more. Intermingled with the regurgitated chunks of food was the pain that I'd had to endure and the bile that I had to swallow. The realization of what my life had become was too much for me. Laying there in the multicolored vomit was my marriage. All 10 years of it. Behind me, I heard footsteps coming from the house. Unlike the heavy sounds of my feet, these steps were lighter and barefooted. The patter of naked feet on the hard ground followed me until they were right next to me. "Artie, please," I heard as I felt a slender arm wrap around me. I violently shook it off as I stumbled backwards to get to my car. "Get away from me, Paige," I yelled as vomit-flavored spit flew from my mouth. I fumbled around in my pocket to find my keys and cursed the hand that refused to work properly. It was jittery and uncontrollable. I felt like that children's machine located at the mall. It's the one with the claw that feebly tries to grab the teddy bear so that it can lift it, transport it over the slot, and drop the prize for the lucky kid who only had to pay 25 cents. When I finally took hold of the keys, I pushed the button on the remote to unlock the doors. "Artie, stop, please. Let's go back in the house and talk," she begged me. I didn't respond to her. Instead, I got in the car and closed the door to cut her off. I then drowned her out by starting the ignition and stepping on the gas. The whir of the engine made her cries of protest inaudible. Before I sped off in a tire-screeching commotion, I took one last look at my wife. There she stood, only clothed in a bathrobe. Her arms were loosely crossed over her chest, as if she were hugging herself. Her hair was wet and disheveled. The worried look on her face wasn't enough to make me forget what that face was doing, not even 5 minutes ago. As we locked eyes, I saw something. Rather, I saw an absence of something. Even through her worry and concern for me, I saw nothing. No love, no respect. Her half-hearted begging for me to come in and talk was just a series of empty words. They were things that she was expected to say in this situation. She wasn't really trying to stop me from leaving. She wasn't frantically banging on my window, desperately protesting her love for me. She didn't even throw in the old, "It's not what it looks like" cliché. Her surface-level concern was just a show, nothing more. She didn't love me. She hadn't for some time. That was the most crushing blow. It was more devastating than the sight of her in the shower with her lover. 5 minutes ago, she was on her knees giving him B-job. However, that vision paled in comparison to the epiphany that just washed over me. Actually, epiphany is a pretentious, overinflated word, especially in this case. It implies that I just figured out something that had previously eluded me. The truth was, this realization wasn't a new one. It was just the reawakening of an old one that I swallowed because I didn't want to face it. That's what happens when you swallow poison. If it doesn't kill you, it comes back up and leaves you heaving on the pavement in front of your house. I pulled off, leaving my ambivalent wife on the sidewalk. Before she disappeared from my rear view, I saw her shake her head and turn to walk back into the house. "Art, you okay? What the hell is wrong with you?" I didn't even answer my brother. I pushed past him and walked into his apartment without even asking if it was okay. He didn't object. He just looked at me with curiosity as he closed the door behind me. I flopped down on his couch like all the energy was sapped from my body. He walked slowly over to the armchair that was next to the couch and sat down, keeping his eyes on me the entire time. I took a quick, judgmental scan of Lance's apartment. It was what I always did when I came here. I couldn't help it. The haphazard way that he lived bothered me. He had discarded clothes strewn around, piles of dirty dishes in his sink, right next to the empty dishwasher, and a trash can full of garbage. It always made me look around in disgust. In front of the chair that he now sat, I could see a PS4 controller laying on the floor. The TV showed a paused basketball video game, confirming that he was playing it prior to answering the door. Next to the chair laid an open bag of Cheetos and a half-empty 2-liter bottle of Mountain Dew. What grown man plays video games at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? My twin brother. That's who. I am older than Lance by 2 minutes. We are fraternal twins. My name is Arthur McCormick. Some of you may have noticed something about our names. Arthur and Lance? Yes, our parents had a sense of humor. I don't know what they expected when they chose these names for us. It was like we were predestined to be at each other's throats. I am just glad that we didn't have a sister. Her name would more than likely have been Gwen. Everything okay, bro? He asked again as he reached over and nudged my leg. I still didn't answer him. After a few minutes of waiting me out, he gave up with a shrug and unpaused his game. It came to life as the sounds of screeching sneakers and sports announcers describing the events on the court came from the TV. Aren't you supposed to be at work? I asked accusingly, completely ignoring the question that he asked. Without looking away from his game, he scoffed and replied, Aren't you? As I watched him, I grew angry. The amount of concentration that he was devoting to something so meaningless irritated me to my soul. How the hell could he sit there, wearing basketball shorts and a tank top, while the rest of the world worked? I mean, he did have a job per se, but it was apparently so trivial that he could call off whenever he felt like. Why is he able to carelessly breeze through life without a care in the world except for how to beat a stupid game? Can you turn that shit off? What are you, 16? I bellowed unexpectedly. It was so uncalled for that it even surprised me. Lance looked a little taken aback by my unprovoked outburst, but it didn't really shake him up. His fingers barely slowed down as they vigorously pressed buttons on the controller. In his typical, Lance-like manner, he simply shrugged it off with a shake of his head and rolled his eyes. What the hell crawled up your butt and died? He asked offhandedly as he continued to focus on what was happening on the television. It was as if I wasn't even sitting there. This was his approach to everything. Nothing mattered. Nothing bothered him. He was impervious to life's hiccups. I could practically feel my blood reaching the boiling point. When it did, something came over me that I can't explain. It was a sudden, uncontrollable urge to lash out. I just wanted something, or someone, to feel what I was feeling. What was I feeling? Anger. Lots of white-hot anger. Unfortunately, Lance was the only target in range. So without warning, I leaped from my chair and snatched the controller from his hand. Before I even knew what I was doing, it was sailing across the room and into the kitchen. As it slammed against the wall, it shattered into nearly a dozen pieces and rained onto the floor. What the hell, Art? He yelled out in disbelief. What the hell is wrong with you? You're what's wrong with me. I yelled back as I poked him in the chest. If you have a problem with me, feel free to leave, a-hole. This is my apartment. Take your fat butt home to your wife. My brain snapped. That's the only way I can describe it. With an animalistic growl, I rushed at him. Lance and I got into it all the time. It was unavoidable to fight with a guy that you shared a room with for the first half of your life. So, me attacking him wasn't completely out of the norm. Unfortunately for me, Lance had always been bigger, stronger, and faster. Despite being my twin brother, he was taller than me by about 4 inches. That was why he played football and I didn't. Because of the disparity in our physical makeup, he always got the better of me. This time was no different. I was thrown to the floor with nearly no effort on his part. Common sense should have told me to calm down and get a grip on myself. It should have at least reminded me that I was fighting a person who wasn't even the root cause of my anger. But who has common sense when they have a belly full of white-hot rage? Rage leads to destructive courage, which leads to a David and Goliath optimism that rational people don't have. All I knew was that something had to feel pain. Right now, in my ardent anger, I leapt up and attacked again. This time, I went for broke and tried to punch him. He fluently leaned back, causing me to miss my mark in a big way. The last thing I remembered was his fist slamming into me, and the stars that followed. I don't know what the hell is wrong with him. He came over here with a shitty attitude, like he always does. Then, out of nowhere, he just snapped and charged me like a bull. That's what the voice in the background was saying when I came to. It sounded like Lance, but it was distorted. As I dazedly opened my eyes, the throbbing in my head made me groan. Memory flooded back to me. I remembered my brother cold cocking me and sending me hurling through space. As I gingerly sat up, I saw that I was stretched out on the couch. He must have put me here, because when he hit me I was on the other side of the room. No doubt I hit the floor. The voice interrupted my thoughts. It was definitely Lance, and it sounded clearer this time. No, you don't understand. I know we always fight, but this was different. This time, he actually swung at me. I mean, he actually tried to hit me. I turned slowly to see him in the kitchen on his cell phone. While he talked, he was reaching into the freezer and digging something out. When he finally turned to me and saw that I was awake, he scowled. Then he smirked and said into the mouthpiece, "What do you think I did?" I knocked his fat butt out. "Now come get your husband before I have to kill him." With that, he hung up the phone, laid it on the kitchen counter. Then he walked over to living room area and handed me a rag with ice in it. You done acting like a retard? Why did you call Paige? I asked groggily, ignoring his rhetorical question. Because she's your wife, dumb shit. You're her problem. I shook my head and placed the homemade ice pack against it. Call her back. Tell her I left. Tell her I died. I don't care. I'll get out of your hair, but I can't talk to her right now. His face turned into one of concern. What the hell is going on with you, Art? You come over here and you take a swing at me? At me? What the hell? Like you care. Whatever. He said with a dismissive scoff. You came over here and jumped on me. Your problem is now my problem. So, either you tell me what's going on or go home and deal with it. As much as I hated to admit it, he was right. I did owe him an explanation for my odd behavior. So the next 5 minutes was filled with me explaining the turn of events. I told him how sick I was feeling after eating a questionable meal from Burger King. The end result was explosive, if you know what I mean. Everything that I had to do at work could have been accomplished from my home computer, so I went home. But, as fate would have it, that bubbly stomach turned into a life-altering discovery about the fate of my marriage. I didn't expect Paige to be home. She worked during the day and spent her lunch hour at the gym. Or so I thought. When I pulled up to my house, there was a strange car parked along the curb. This didn't set off any warning bells because we've had people park in front of our house to visit our next-door neighbors. Since I didn't see Paige's car, I didn't associate this with her. I was also a little too preoccupied to care about some random car. My mission was to make it to the bathroom as quickly as humanly possible. So, I simply swing into my driveway without giving it a second thought. As I walked into the house, I felt my meal trying to escape me. I rushed to the bathroom to avoid making a mess in my pants. When I burst through the door, I found two very surprised lovers. Needless to say, I no longer had to shit. But that feeling in my stomach was no less explosive. That scene would have been funny if it wasn't so tragic. I half expected Lance to laugh at me as I retold my horrific afternoon, but he didn't. He grew more and more pensive as the story came out. When I was done, he just shook his head and growled. Then, with pursed lips, he angrily yelled out, "Bitch! That stupid bitch! Screw her!" I chuckled inappropriately and joked, "Funny thing, that's exactly what that guy was doing." He ignored it. Instead, he paced around in anger. Who is the scumsucker? Is it someone we know? Then he stopped pacing and looked at me with as if something occurred to him. God damn it, Art. Tell me it's not Brian. That snake has always had his eye on Paige. No, it's not Brian. You remember what the last guy did to him for screwing his wife. I don't think he'll be messing with any married women for a while. I don't know who this guy is. He looks familiar, but I can't place his face. Truth be told, this bro moment was exactly what I needed. Sometimes, you just need someone on your side. You need an ally to hate who you hate, and be angry just because you are. No words of wisdom, no pretentious platitudes, just an ear to hear and a heart to feel. Lance and I rarely saw eye to eye, but at the end of the day, we were still twin brothers. We were allowed to screw with each other. That was our right, but if anyone else tried it, a knock at the door jarred us. We gave each other a knowing look as he got up to answer it. I could hear Paige's voice on the other side asking about me. He left, Lance said abruptly in a rude, deadpan voice. After a pause, Paige said, "But, you called me and told me?" He left, Lance repeated, cutting her off. His voice was bland and flat, but it was brimming with disgust. As she stood there speechless, he ended the conversation with a pointed, "Bye, Paige," before slamming the door in her face. When he came back and sat down in his chair, I gave him a small smile of gratitude. He nodded slightly to acknowledge it, grabbed another controller from his entertainment center, and continued to play his game. Nothing else was said as we sat there like that for the rest of the afternoon. Later in the evening, it became apparent that I couldn't avoid Paige forever. At some point, I had to confront what was going on. My procrastination in doing so was an odd way of me holding on to the last vestibules of my life. Once I went home, the demise of my marriage would be real. Questions would be asked, answers would be given, and decisions would be made. Naturally, a fair amount of swearing, yelling, and name-calling would be sprinkled in for good measure. You can't really have cheating without the emotional outbursts that accompany it, can you? After hours of silently watching Lance play games, I told him that I was heading out. As I got up to leave, he walked me to the door. "You good?" he asked with a worried expression. "Not really, but I am not going to do anything stupid," I answered truthfully. He nodded and grabbed me in a quick hug. "Good luck, bro," he said as he opened the door to let me out. I drove home in depressing silence. The only sounds heard were those of passing cars and my own thoughts cheating me. How could she do this to me? Why would she? Those were the questions that every other thought revolved around. My brain tried to rationalize things. It struggled to come up with an answer. When it did arrive at one, I dismissed it and looked for another. The reality of knowing that she just didn't love me was too painful to bear. I finally arrived home and parked in my driveway next to Paige's Nissan Maxima. The strange car that was in front of my house was gone. Everything looked so normal, so much so that I could have almost fooled myself into thinking it was all a dream. But it wasn't. It was real. My mind replayed the entire afternoon frame by frame. Her wet body knelt in deference to him. I was assaulted with all of it. However, the vision that stuck wasn't the live-action Skymax movie that played out in my bathroom. It was the one outside. Paige's lackluster pleas for me to come into the house and the apathetic attempt to console me told a story of a problem that I'd overlooked. Maybe it wasn't really apathy. That could have just been how it appeared to me. But there was a definite lack of hysteria. When a person is facing the loss of something that is precious to them, they get a bit hysteric. Their pleas have a desperation to them. Paige sounded like she was trying to convince me to let her mother stay for the weekend, rather than begging me to forgive her. Wasn't I even worth that? A desperate plea for forgiveness? I looked up and saw a silhouette in the window looking out at me. It was too tall to be our son or daughter, Josh and Allie, who coincidentally were twins because Paige also carried the twin gene. I knew it had to be Paige. At least, I hoped it was. Could just as well have been another lover. Okay, maybe that was petty. I sighed, opened the door, and stepped out of the car. With labored steps, I trudged towards the house and finally made my way onto the porch. I looked towards the window that held the silhouette and confirmed that it was Paige's. We locked eyes for a moment before I turned the knob and walked in. "Your brother is a rude a-hole," she said in a lifeless voice when I closed the door behind me. She didn't even turn around. Yeah, well, I would think that it's ruder to give B-job to another guy's in the shower while I am at work. I was secretly pleased that she flinched when I said that. I didn't see the look on her face, but I was hoping that it was a hurt expression. Maybe even a few tears. Probably not. A person would have to care to have those reactions. After an awkward pause, I started to go upstairs. I had so many things that I wanted to say, but I didn't know where to start. Luckily, she broke the silence, albeit saying the most obvious statement ever known to man. "We should talk." I sighed loudly, but said nothing. Half of me was irritated with having to do this. The other half desperately needed to. She turned around to face me. When her eyes fell on my obviously bruised face, they softened with empathy. She reached out to touch me, but I backed away and shook my head at the movement. It was too familiar, too loving. Both of those were unacceptable right now. This time she was the one to let out a sigh. Then she simply walked past me and into the living room. Accepting the unspoken invitation, I followed her. After we seated ourselves on opposite ends of the room, a dense silence fell on us. I was the first to speak. "Where are the kids?" "My sisters," she said, contributing to the small talk. I nodded and nervously tapped my foot. "Okay, Paige," I said when there was nothing left to say but what we desperately had to. "You wanted to talk, so talk." Being put on the spot like that must have thrown her off a little, because she stammered as she struggled to find what to say. I. She then looked off to the side and gathered herself. "I just wanted to start out saying that I am sorry. You didn't deserve to find out that way. I know that you're angry with me, and I deserve it." What the hell was that? Was that supposed to be an apology? Not for cheating on me, but for how I found out about it. Was that supposed to make me feel better? I guess the fault is mine. You see, I thought you were at work. If I had known that you were entertaining company, then I would have been more courteous and called you. That way, you could have had time to get your lover's rocks off before I walked in. I spit sarcastically. She shook her head. "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "No, of course not. What you meant to say was, Artie, I am so sorry for screwing another guy behind your back. I am sorry for cheating on you in your own house. It was a horrible, selfish, bitchy thing to do," I said, using an annoying, whiny, high-pitched voice to imitate her. Then I said, "I mean, that's what any other wife would say." She glared at me. "First off," she said with a tinge of irritation in her voice, "this is our house. I pay bills just as much as you do. Secondly, you're twisting my words around." I couldn't help but to chuckle, though nothing was funny. It was more in disbelief than amusement. "Wow, you get caught cheating, and you want to argue semantics about how we split the bills?" I could see her trying to come up with a response. Before she could, I jumped back in. "For the record, I am not twisting your words around. I hear what you're saying, but I also hear what you're not saying. So why don't we try this? Drop the I am sorry act. Just be real with me and stop with the half-assed apologizing. She shook her head sadly. Believe what you want, Artie, but I am sorry. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt my face twist to match the skepticism that ran through my mind. Really? You didn't think that this would hurt me? Tell me, what exactly are you sorry for? Because you didn't apologize for screwing another guy. You didn't apologize for throwing our marriage into the trash. You certainly didn't apologize for screwing him while you were not screwing me. So, what the hell are you sorry for? I already told you. You're just not listening. Whatever, I said with a dismissive wave of my hand. The two of us sat there for an awkward moment before another question came to me. How long has it been since we made love? What does that have to do with anything? She asked, though the look on her face cheated her attempt at naivete. She knew where I was going with this. I can't remember the last time we screwed in the shower in the middle of the day. When we have sex, it's never spontaneous like that. It's more like you're doing me a favor, or rewarding me for doing something that you wanted. But that a-hole gets an enthusiastic B-job. I was getting angry at the sound of my own voice. The words that I was saying was making me see angles of the cheating that I didn't think about earlier. With a voice filled with disgust, I asked, how much more was he getting than me? She looked at me with irritation in her eyes. I am not answering that. I ignored her. My calculations say that I was getting about, I pretended to think about it, then said, twice a month. You agree? You're being a child, she said with contempt. And you're a bitch. I spit out with venom. She looked me in the eyes for a moment before turning away. I could see the embers of anger burning. She hated being called a bitch. Calling me names isn't going to get us anywhere. I recognized this voice that she was using. It's the voice that she has when someone is pissing her off, but she is still trying to be civil. Neither is dodging questions. Those aren't questions. You just want to get a rise out of me. She was right. I wanted her to feel what I was feeling. Angry, helpless, cheated. Anything close to what was going on in the pit of my stomach would have been nice. But that wasn't possible. No matter what I said or did, she couldn't feel any of those things. She couldn't feel them because I didn't cheat her. Like the good little husband, I stayed true to my vows. Things fell silent for a few seconds as I stewed. Finally, I asked the question that I desperately needed to be answered. Do you still love me, Paige? There was a pregnant pause. That pause was worth 1,000,000 poetic phrases written by Shakespeare. There were no words that would have spoken louder than that second or two of silence. Yes, I do. I'll always love you. Just not that way. Not anymore. Not that way. I was having trouble settling on what that meant. What other way was there to love a spouse? I always thought the answer to that question was either yes or no. In my opinion, if it wasn't an immediate and undisputable yes, then it was a no. Earlier this evening, I thought that she didn't love me. Not even an hour ago, I had the same thought again in the car. Now, I knew it with certainty. I couldn't do this. Not now. Not that way, sucked all the energy from me. So, I silently got up from the couch. Unfortunately, I had to pass by her to leave. She seized this opportunity to stop me by reaching out and grabbing my hand. Please, don't run away. We have to finish this. Now. It's been a long time coming. I snatched my hand away and glared at her. What else needs to be said? You don't love me. Nothing else matters. That's not what I said, and you know it, she said defensively. I understand you're hurt right now. I did that to you, and I regret it. But you're twisting everything I say around. I sneered. That's big of you to understand what I am going through. You're so in touch me. So, tell me, when did you fall out of love with me? Was it before or after you started screwing other people? Because I don't remember you mentioning anything to me. I said this sarcastically, using my fingers to do air quotes when I said, fall out of love. She looked at me with narrowed eyes. There you go again. Being a shit isn't going to make this any easier. My bad, Paige. I am sorry. Really, I am. I didn't realize how hard this was for you. She started to say something, but then stopped. It seemed that my cynicism was finally wearing down the last bit of her pretentiously civil demeanor. You know what, Artie? You're right. I should stop apologizing. You're gonna believe what you want and turn everything I say into something evil. I couldn't help getting one last jab in. So, was this you trying to spare my feelings? The 304 with the heart of gold. That was the last straw. The apologetic expression on her face disappeared. First, it was replaced by a look of irritation. Then it twisted into an arrogant smirk. She laughed contemptuously and said, yes, I was trying to spare your feelings. You see, I wasn't going to tell you that you are a boring, overweight man whose idea of lovemaking is 2 pumps and an apology. I wasn't going to remind you that the last time we spontaneously went on a date or did anything fun was before I was pregnant. Oh no, I definitely wasn't going to tell you that your sad attempt at seduction is a pitiful 5 minutes of lazy sex. I wasn't going to mention any of that. Her words hit their mark. I know that I asked for the truth, but I didn't realize that the truth was so brutal. It didn't help that the delivery was done in an intentionally destructive way. So, I did what anybody does when he's attacked. I retaliated. Well, when you have a wife who just lays there like a warm blow-up doll, what kind of romance do you expect? She just smirked. Apparently, I didn't strike hard enough, because her next blow was the coup de grace. Why do you think I just lay there like that? Huh? You think that you can just jump in the car in the middle of winter, crank it up, and speed off? She laughed like I was amusing her and shook her head with a smug twinkle in her eye. A girl needs something to work with. If you really saw me and Derek this afternoon, then you would have seen what kind of woman I am when I have a man who actually knows what he's doing. Boom. That was the sound of my heart and my pride hitting the floor. All I could do was stand there dumbfounded as her words echoed around in my head. There was no comeback after that. Nothing more could be said for me to save face. She'd essentially left me incapacitated with a blow well struck in the most vulnerable place I had. My manhood. I don't know what my face showed, but it must have been abysmal agony. Her anger vanished instantly, and her expression became horrified and even more apologetic than it was. God, Artie, I am so sorry. Please, I didn't want it to come out this way. She may have continued speaking, or she may have stopped in mid-sentence. I honestly couldn't tell you. By the time she started backtracking and trying to recant her hurtful words, I'd left the room. I awoke with a start the following morning. My alarm hadn't awakened me like it normally did. I looked up to where the clock was supposed to be and found an unfamiliar emptiness in its place. It took me a minute to realize that I wasn't in my comfortable king-sized bed. I was in the guest bedroom, sleeping on a twin bed with a mattress no thicker than a maxi pad. My body was telling me that I was late for work. I could feel it, even if there weren't digital numbers on a clock to point that out. I sat up and stretched, wincing as my back cracked and punished me for not having the good sense to at least sleep on the couch. When I slid out of bed and looked to the mirror above the dresser, I groaned. The reflection showed a man who was haphazardly dressed in wrinkled clothes that he'd worn the day before. Boring, overweight man came to mind as my image stared at me. I lifted my shirt, took a deep breath, and sucked in my stomach. It didn't look so bad. That's what I thought until I exhaled and let my stomach resume its natural state. It popped out and sagged over my belt. When had I let myself go like this? Seeing that less than flattering picture brought recollections of last night's argument. The same sting that I felt when Paige expressed her true feelings returned. I gazed at the man in the mirror, and I had to turn away. I couldn't look at him without hearing her taunts. He was a loser. So much so that his wife had to go behind his back and find his replacement. I trudged to the main bathroom. After a quick knock to ensure that Allie wasn't barricaded in there, I opened the door and walked in. I sleepily performed my morning ritual, being sure to avoid that evil mirror over the sink, and prepared for another day. Before the events of yesterday, I thought my life was pretty good. I decided to stay with Walmart after I graduated from college. With my degree in business management, I was eventually promoted to district manager. Now, after 18 years, I was responsible for 4 supercenters and 3 neighborhood markets. My job wasn't glamorous by any standards. However, it was an honest living that paid very well. My wife and I cleared over $200K a year with our salaries combined. We practically had everything that we desired. A nice house, 2 new cars, and 2 children with private school educations. Even though both of us worked full-time, we took time out for our children. Paige made sure that she was home early enough to cook for the family, and we alternated chauffeuring the kids to various functions. Josh was on the soccer team, and Allie loved to have sleepovers with her best friend. There were other things that the twins required, such as school shopping, helping with school projects, or simply being a referee. Keeping up with them required both of us. Isn't that the American dream? I thought so. Apparently, that dream wasn't enough, Paige. It turns out that what she desired was something I was incapable of giving her. All she wanted was to be with someone who was not me. When I exited the bathroom, I wasn't really paying attention. Just as I was stepping out, Paige was quickly walking down the hall heading to Josh's room. No doubt she was storming in there to wake him up for a second time. He often rolled over and went back to sleep. My kids reminded me of Lance and myself. Allie was the responsible one, like me, and Josh was the charmer, like Lance. The two of us practically ran into each other. Paige was light on her feet, so she expertly dodged me and avoided the collision. We both awkwardly apologized as we sidestepped each other, like two strangers bumping into each other on the street. Then we just stood there with an uncomfortable silence falling between us. Have to get Josh up? She finally stammered. Okay, was my brilliant response. Then we just turned in opposite directions and put some distance between us. I was never as happy to find myself driving to work as I was that morning. I had to get out of that house. Once I was safely behind my desk, I tried to put Paige on the back burner. As long as I was actively engaged in a task, I was fine. But whenever there was a few minutes of downtime, I thought about her and her paramour. In many ways, that moment in the shower was frozen as a shrine to all the ways that I wasn't man enough for her. There is no bigger form of emasculation than a woman who wants a man so much that she is willing to jettison her husband. If you really saw me and Derek this afternoon, then you would have seen what I am really like when I have a man who actually knows what he's doing. I couldn't ignore that statement. With that a-hole, whoever he was, she was adventurous, spontaneous, and open. Even a bit of a nympho. She was the sexual being that she wasn't with me. I could see that, even in that small window of time. Whatever he did for her, I didn't do. I couldn't deny that with the evidence right there in my face. My phone vibrated in my pocket. I fished it out and saw that I had a text from Paige. I groaned as I read it. Last night got out of hand. We need to talk without the petty bullshit. I felt the anger rising up again. The petty BS? Did she really type that? Is that how she saw last night? I didn't lash out, though. There wasn't any point. I simply wrote back. Agreed. We'll talk tonight. A few moments later, the reply was, okay, see you then. I looked at the time on my phone before putting it away. It was almost time to get going. I had to visit one of my locations and do a walkthrough. This particular location was my problem child. Sales were low, thefts were high, and there were always incidents. These problems weren't the result of a lazy staff or a bad store manager. It was the location. This store was set in the middle of a low-income part of town, aka the ghetto. Many people gasp when distinctions are made between different communities. It's become taboo to even bring these things up, even if it relates to why bad things happen to businesses. Political correctness prohibits us from looking at it. If we do, we're either racists or fascists. We're supposed to ignore it and pretend there are other factors. Truth was, this Walmart closed at midnight while every other Walmart within 50 miles was open 24/7. Why was that? Because there were more fights, shootings, thefts, and robberies in this area. Several businesses had been robbed within a 2-mile radius over the past 6 months. That wasn't a slam against minorities or against class. These were facts. So, I drove out to my problem child to meet with the store manager, Phil. No matter how much I loathed this store, I liked Phil. He was actually my favorite manager. The thing that set him apart from other managers was he was one of the youngest people to occupy this position, yet the most motivated. He was only in his early 30s, and he was running his very own store. He was a nice guy, very professional, always had a positive attitude, and he was a hard worker. He tried his hardest to bring the store's performance up when he could have just accepted it as an easy assignment. He was successful in many aspects, more successful than his predecessors. Still, I felt that the economics kept him from reaching his full potential. When I got to the location, I found him in his office working on his computer and talking on the phone. He smiled jovially when he saw me, stood, and shook my hand. After initial small talk, he led me on a tour through each of his departments. I talked to each of the department managers about their performance and did a light inspection to see any glaring violations or things that could be improved. Once I was back in Phil's office, I watched him. It occurred to me that he didn't really look like a typical store manager. His youth was definitely a factor, but there was also something else. His physique was that of a guy who worked out regularly. He wasn't a large bodybuilder, but his chest, shoulders, and flat stomach made his shirt and tie hang on him attractively. I know that watching him like I was sound strange, but I couldn't help it. I kept hearing my wife's taunts in the back of my head. I wasn't going to tell you that you are a boring, overweight man whose idea of lovemaking is 2 pumps and an apology. Phil, do you mind if I ask you a personal question? Not at all. There was no way to word this without sounding like I was checking him out, so I just honestly asked, you look like you spend a fair amount of time in the gym. How do you find the time? I expected him to look uncomfortable, but he didn't. You're not the first person to ask me that, Arthur. Truthfully, it's not as hard as people make it out to be. Being healthy isn't some unattainable goal. I laughed at that. You gym people always make it sound so easy. No, it's true. He paused for a moment, like he was gathering his thoughts. Do you mind if I ask you a couple of personal questions? I was uncomfortable with the direction of this conversation, but I said, shoot. When you get off work, what do you do? I thought about it for a moment. I realized where he was going with this, so naturally I tried to find ways to justify my position. I work anywhere from 9 to 12 hours every day. When I get home, I am bone tired. All I can do is get some dinner and sit down to rest. He nodded thoughtfully. What do you eat? I thought about it and once again, looked for ways to justify myself. My wife is a healthy cook. Most of the time I eat what she cooks. Like? You know, the usual. Vegetables. I made sure to mention that first. Baked chicken, fish, rice, things like that. He nodded again and asked, what do you eat when she doesn't cook? Well, those are days that I eat out, but they aren't often. Okay, admittedly, I overstated and understated certain things. My wife did cook healthy meals. However, that didn't stop me from enjoying a donut or a scone for breakfast, or a quarter pounder for lunch. But I wasn't going to admit that to him. Phil may have known this, or may have taken me at my word. I couldn't tell. He had a good poker face. What he did do was reach in his desk and pull out a card. I used to work at this gym before I came to Walmart. We had a great staff and some really good trainers. As a matter of fact, the woman who now manages the place was a trainer when I worked there. You should drop by and check it out. If you ever want to see if there are changes that you could make, someone there could help you. I grabbed the card and looked at it. On it, there was a logo for a gym in the middle of it. Superimposed over the logo was the contact information. The manager's name is Naomi. If you ever decide to go, tell her Phil sent you. As I drove home, I thought about Phil. His questions stuck with me. The real answers to those questions stuck with me more. When I pulled into my driveway, I stuffed the card in my wallet and prepared myself to have the most heart-wrenching conversation known to man. Again, when I walked into my house, I found Paige sitting in the living room. The TV was on, but she didn't seem to be very interested in it. Where are the kids? I asked, noticing a lack of noise. I sent them to my sister's again. 2 days in a row? No doubt she suspects something is up. Yeah, well, better that than they hear any of our angry outbursts. I made myself let that one go. Once again, I took a seat opposite of her. For a few moments, the seconds ticked away on the clock with nothing being said. I broke the awkward silence with an even more awkward question. Why Paige? The weight of those 2 words was dense and packed with emotional heft. She blinked twice in a futile effort to stop the tear that escaped and trailed down her cheek. Because I am not attracted to you anymore. I don't find you appealing, she said, as if she regretted having to say the words. I don't know why I asked. She already told me as much last time we talked. I guess I needed to hear it again to seal it in my mind. Even though this was the second time, the pain that I felt was fresh. With my heart in my throat, I asked, so, you fell out of love with me because I am fat? More tears streamed down her face. It's not just that, Artie. It's me and you. It's everything. I don't think there's anything left of what we used to be. We barely do anything together. It's all about the kids and the bills. When we finally are together, there's no spark. With my teeth grit and my lips pursed, I spit out, it doesn't help that I suck in bed. This time, there was no retaliation on her part. She just shook her head sadly and said, I am sorry about saying those things to you yesterday. I really am. I was angry. Are they true? I asked hopefully. For some odd reason, my heart latched on to the far-fetched possibility that she would recant. But she didn't. She didn't confirm nor deny it. But the look on her face was answer enough. My heart broke once again with the sting of rejection. Why didn't you just tell me? I could have changed. Why did you let me go all of these years looking like an idiot? Why did you have to cheat on me? Why, Paige? Why? I shot at her. There were so many whys that demanded answers. I didn't even have time to ask them all. She shrugged her shoulders and sniffled. I tried to tell you, at least in the beginning, but it never changed anything. After a while, I just brushed it off and just went along with things. We had such a good life that I felt like I had no right to be unhappy. The kids were happy. You were happy. I guess, I don't know. She threw her hands up at the last part of her explanation. I couldn't help getting the what the hell look on my face. You never told me that I was not good in bed. I would have remembered that. But I did tell you that you were gaining weight and that you should try to lose some, she said defensively. I was flabbergasted. Everyone's wife says that. How was I supposed to know that that means you're unhappy in the marriage? And for the record, I wasn't happy either. I had a wife who wasn't fully there. I didn't put two and two together, but deep down I knew that something was wrong with our marriage. I just figured that marriages go through that, and I dealt with it. You just dealt with it? She said, getting agitated. That's the problem right there. Complacency. Why didn't you say something? Why didn't you see if there was a way to revive us? You just said that deep down you knew something was wrong. Why didn't you do something about it instead of just dealing with it? I was not going to let her misdirect blame onto me. So, that gives you the right to cheat? I said sharply. Yes, I thought something was wrong, but I wasn't the one cheating. You were. I didn't use a stale marriage as an excuse to go out and get some strange. You were the one who felt enough discontent to go outside the marriage. You were the one that found me boring, fat, and unappealing. That means that you had the greater responsibility to say something. Instead, you stood back and let us end up here. She looked like she was on the verge of saying something, but she stopped. Then she sadly nodded her head in humble acquiescence. After a few more seconds of silence, she asked, "So what now?" I don't know, Paige. I guess. I wanted to tell her to go screw herself. I wanted to kick her out. But, for some reason, I wasn't able to say the word divorce. That word was one I never thought I'd say. I don't know. I repeated. She looked uneasy. Her eyes were cast down, but I could still see something in them. She was figuring out a way to tell me something. As she opened her mouth to speak, my heart dropped. I knew what was coming next. I think we should get a divorce, Artie, she said softly without looking up. The words rang over and over in my head like a church bell. She was right. The logical solution to this dilemma was to cut our losses and move on. That sounds so easy, doesn't it? But that's the problem with marriage. It isn't logical. Nothing about love is. What person goes into a business deal knowing that it has a 50% failure rate? No one does. Love and marriage are both emotion-based commitments. Logistics just get in the way. But for her, it was an easy fix. Just split up. Easy peasy. Nothing to see here. I became angry. Of course, I was angry with the infidelity and all, but there was also a juvenile element to it. I was angry that I wasn't the one who suggested that we split up. She was the one who cheated. I should have been the one telling her to pack her shit and go. Instead, I hesitated to pull the trigger. My heart had one last shred of hope left, but I should have known that she didn't feel the same way. Her actions said that in spades. Of course you think we should, I said sarcastically. Never mind worrying about how it will affect the twins. No, we need to divorce because you just need sex only. Come on, Artie. Even you said that you were unhappy. Yeah, but I was about to launch into more reasons why she was absurd in her thinking. But then I realized that there was no point. She was done with me, had been for some time. The only thing groveling would accomplish is make me look and feel like a loser. I felt like I had to leave this room, get away from her. The stink of rejection was all over me. This time when I got up to leave, she didn't stop me. I started to walk out, but I had one burning question left. I stopped at the vestibule leading to the foyer. Who was that guy? I asked without turning around to face her. I was trying to remain calm in asking this, and I couldn't do that if I looked at her. Derek. His name is Derek. He's a guy I work with. Derek. I repeated in a voice that didn't even break a whisper. I think I remember him. From that office party 2 years ago. The two of you danced together a lot. She must have read in between the lines of what I was saying, because her response was almost immediate. We weren't sleeping together then. I promise. A sad scoff escaped my lips. Well, I guess that's something, isn't it? I turned my head just enough to glance at her from the corner of my eye. Were you guys flirting? Something had to be going on. I could see something. Your interaction was way too friendly to just be colleagues. What does it matter, Artie? She asked sadly. It matters to me. Her eyes rolled and ended up looking at the ceiling. Fine. I guess you can say that there was a lot of attraction there. Maybe even a little flirting. But it was nothing more than office banter. It wasn't until we met at the gym that things started to become more real. When I responded this time, I wasn't able to hold the venom at bay. The gym? Of course you met at the gym. And that made you enthusiastic about ruining your marriage, right? But it was justifiable because I am a fat, boring guy who can't satisfy his wife. Artie, she whined. I paid her no attention and continued my rant. Because he's a great sex who knows what he's doing. That turns you into some sort of nympho. Isn't that what you told me? She didn't answer. Instead, she repeated her catchphrase, I am sorry that I said those things to you. I was so sick of hearing her say that. It was a slap in the face. I know it was supposed to be an apology to bomb over the pain that she caused, but it was hollow. She wasn't sorry for what she said. She was sorry for saying it aloud. Those were her real feelings. Her only regret was getting angry enough to allow the filter to fully drop. Whatever. I spit as I walked out. I left straight out of the house and into my car. Once again, I ended up at my brother's place. He answered the door, looked at me, and then stepped aside to let me in. "You staying over?" he asked. I answered with a nod. Without a word, he disappeared into the back of the apartment and returned with a blanket. "Thanks," I said as I grabbed it. "No problem." As he walked to his bedroom, he yelled out over his shoulder, "Just don't start acting like a shit. I will knock your butt out." Again. I spread the blanket out on the couch, got undressed, and went into the bathroom to use it before I laid down. As I washed my hands, I looked at myself in Lance's mirror. With a shake of my head, I exited the bathroom and stretched out on my impromptu bed. What had my life become? How did it turn out this way? I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do. I worked hard, I honored my wife and family, and I never broke the law. Yet, here I was sleeping on my brother's couch like I was the one who did something wrong. Darkness loomed over me as I closed my eyes to try to get some sleep. I was unable to sleep. Lance's couch was uncomfortable, but that wasn't the reason for my insomnia. My mind would not shut off. Demons tormented me into the wee hours of the morning. They were haunting me with visions of my wife and Derek. One would think that I kept seeing them entangled in sweaty ecstasy, but what I saw was the exact opposite. I saw them at the gym, working out together. I saw them at the job, joking and laughing with each other. They were sneaking away for intimate moments. Their smiles, their flirting, their insipid infatuation. These visions were so much worse than what I saw in the shower. Did they ever talk about me? That thought stung me in the heart, making me feel like Steve Irwin, the crocodile hunter. It not only hurt, but it directly attacked my pride. Surely, if they did bring me up, it was in comparison to how I stacked up against him. Or rather, how I didn't stack up. Did she tell him how much better he was in bed than me? Did she tell him that his fit body was a bigger turn on than my fat, untuned torso? Of course she did. Why wouldn't she? I did manage to catch a few winks of sleep before I heard Lance getting ready for work. A quick glance at my cell phone told me that it was a little past 7. When he came out of his room, he was dressed and ready. I saw him go into the kitchen, grab a spoon from the drawer, and pull a yogurt out from the fridge. I didn't think he even knew I was awake until he asked, "You going to work today?" "I don't know. Maybe." He shook his head and ripped the foil top off. After a quick lick of the excess yogurt on the back, he threw it away and stirred the contents of the cup. Then he leaned against the counter and ate his meal standing up like some frat kid. Does he do anything like an adult? I asked myself. I wanted to say something, but I just let it go. It wasn't worth it. Besides, I was staying at his place and had no timetable for when I wouldn't need to. Sleeping on his couch seemed like a better alternative to going home and dealing with my loveless marriage. So I didn't want to wear out my welcome just yet. Nothing else was said until he was heading out. I had turned on the TV and was randomly switching the channels when he said, "Art, don't let that bitch turn you into some sad loser. I've seen it happen to guys, and it's pathetic. I don't want that for you. You gotta let her go and move on to the next. There are plenty of women out there." He gave me a quick nod, like he just imparted some timeless wisdom into me, and walked out. I found myself sitting there thinking about what he said. I wasn't thinking about the words of wisdom that spilled from his mouth. I was stunned speechless by how dumb he sounded. His arrogant view of my situation made me angry. In his mind, Paige was on the same level as one of his girlfriends of the week. It didn't matter that we knew each other for 12 years and were married for 10 of them. He didn't notice the difference between that and his relationships that never made it to the first anniversary. For him, a breakup meant a brief period of mourning followed by a stint in bachelorhood. Then, the next set of pretty eyes would bat at him, and the process would start all over again. I guess life's that easy when you're Lance. How nice it must be to have the world so accommodating. Our existence proves that life is unfair. As kids, everyone always went on and on about how handsome he was and how much of a heartbreaker he would be. When he reached high school, he was the boy that even had the teachers fanning themselves when he walked by. I wasn't that blessed, despite being his twin. Don't get me wrong, I wasn't ugly. I would have even been considered kind of handsome if he wasn't the one I was constantly compared to. What I lacked in the looks department, I made up for in hard work. I got my first job as soon as I turned 16. I was the maintenance associate, janitor, for the McDonald's down the street from my house. Working in the fast food environment was more stress than it was worth, so I started working for Walmart when I turned 17. Being a stalker suited me better than mopping up vomit and other bodily functions. I steadily worked 25 hours a week and still managed to keep a 3.5 GPA. You would think that my parents would have been proud to have a son like this. They should have been bragging to all their friends about me. Well, my accomplishments paled in comparison to Lance's. He played football. As the running back for our school, he was responsible for more touchdowns than our quarterback. It was almost unfair having him on our team. His speed, size, and athleticism made him a weapon that our coach yielded in every tough situation. Naturally, this made him ridiculously popular. Even when I had saved up enough money to buy a car, women flocked to him and ignored me. It got to the point that when he introduced me as his twin brother, people would first show surprise that we were brothers, and then they would snicker at me being his twin, anything. He even got special treatment at home. Our parents treated him like the Faberge son. My dad was too busy being proud of his football legend to treat him with any kind of discipline. My mom doted on him like he was frozen in time at 5 years old. They were constantly protecting him like he was a priceless, yet fragile, piece of art. Anything he did was worthy of a parade in his honor. Me? I was expected to be the responsible one, and was to do so with little recognition. Good grades were an absolute. If I brought home an A in calculus, I got a good job, son. If he scored a touchdown, there would be newspaper clippings littering the house with his picture on it. Thus began our dynamic. I graduated high school and went to college to get my undergrad. Walmart treated me pretty good, so I continued working there. I was promoted twice before I graduated with my BA in business management. Even with the increased workload, I still kept a decent GPA. Him? He was allowed to basically sleep in class, cheat his way through high school via some random smart girl, or even an infatuated teacher or two, and graduate. To further highlight our disparity and how unfair life is, he went to college on a full ride while I practically owed Sally Mae my firstborn. What did he do with all that opportunity laid at his feet? He lost his scholarship because he partied too hard and got caught with drugs. Without that, he had to pay for school. Our parents weren't really in a financial position to support his education, so his choices were to take out loans, get a job, or simply drop out. Since football was the only reason he was in college in the first place, he didn't even try to figure out a way to stay. He just gave up and came home. Having a kid flunk out of college and ruin his free ride would have been a huge disappointment for most parents to deal with. Not mine. They immediately jumped into Operation Save Lance and treated him like he was the victim. It didn't matter that he was the one who screwed up. No, he needed all of us to clean up the mess, and they showed no hesitation in doing it. Now he had a job that my father got him, an apartment that I gave him the deposit for, and a car that my dad co-signed for. No wonder he eased through life without a care at the world. His carefree days were spent in the gym, playing games, and occasionally going to work. What would he know about being rejected like I was? The cheating aspect was bad enough, but the way she casually tossed the marriage aside was something else. It was like there was nothing worth fighting for, nothing about me worth loving. I sighed as I slumped down into the couch. For the first time since all this started, I allowed the tears to slip down my face. I stayed with my brother for a week. That was the amount of time that it took for us to get so sick of each other, it became imperative for the universe that we be separated. I was grateful that he let me stay with him. While I could have gone to a hotel, I think I subconsciously needed to be around someone who loved me, even if it was Lance. During that week, I'd received several texts from Paige asking where I was, and if I were coming back. I laughed to myself and casually tossed my phone on the couch next to me when I got those. But then she said the twins were asking questions that needed to be addressed by both of us. I was willing to ignore her, but I had to face the kids. So, that meant I had to go back home. I took a day off work so that I could go home when the house was empty. I felt that it would be better to already be there when she and the kids got home. That way, I could avoid suffering through small talk and forced cordiality with her. My plan failed because I have the worst luck in the world. I pulled into the driveway and mentally groaned when I saw her car already there. Either she picked today of all days to stay home, or she'd been staying home all this week. I just couldn't catch a break. I tentatively walked in. I honestly didn't know what to expect. I silently prayed to unknown deities to spare me the cruelty of bearing witness to another episode of Paige and Derek having sex. I couldn't go through that twice and not end up in prison. Someone up there heard me, because I found her in the bedroom fully clothed and alone, thank God. She was pulling clothes out of the closet and throwing them on the bed. I didn't even have to look at them to see that they were my clothes. She was working so fervently that she was sweating and slightly out of breath. "You're finally back," she said in a winded voice when she saw me enter the room. She stopped her task and put her hands on her hips. "What are you doing with my clothes?" I asked, alternating between looking at them and her. She huffed out a small, incredulous laugh. I wasn't sure you were ever coming home. You ran away without telling me where you were going. Then, you didn't answer any of my calls or texts. So, I was packing your stuff to save you the trouble if you ever decided to pick it up. I shook my head. You're full of shit, Paige. You knew where I was. She rushed at me and poked her finger into my chest. No, you're full of shit, she said angrily. You run and hide, and leave me here to answer to the kids by myself. I was beside myself. I know she wasn't trying to make herself the victim of my thoughtlessness. Please, tell me you're joking. Please. I don't want to believe that I married someone who is this detached from reality. There is no way that you actually believe that I did you wrong. You do remember why I was gone in the first place, don't you? She crossed her arms across her chest, but she at least had the decency to look apologetic. Then she took a deep breath and looked away from me. Okay, fine, it's my fault, she admitted in a small voice as she uncrossed her arms and sat on the bed. I started all of this. You have a right to be angry with me. For what it's worth, I am really sorry. I was wrong for cheating on you. I was sick of hearing her apologize, but at least this one was better than the previous. She actually apologized for what she did, not for how I found out about it. Did you ever love me? I asked sincerely. I know that you didn't in the end, but what about the beginning? We did have some good times, didn't we? There was no bitterness in my voice. It was an honest question. Yeah, we did. And I did love you. I still do, believe it or not. She answered with a forlorn expression on her face. She didn't say, just not that way at the end of her statement, but I knew the implication was there. I wanted to ask her more questions, but there was no point. She was through with me, and there was nothing left to salvage. Besides, I didn't need to get my pride beat up on anymore. We stood there in silence, letting the chasm between us widen. I didn't fight it any longer. I gave in to the inevitable. Well, I guess the thing we do now is try to move forward as adults. We have a lot to figure out. So, I'll grab these clothes and move them into the guest room, I finally said. She gave a sad nod. I tried to bomb over the awkwardness with a joke, so I added, just so you know, I'm going to buy a new bed to put in there. She chuckled. Yeah, well, you're the one who bought that uncomfortable bed. Remember? Lance was going to stay with us for a little while, and you didn't want him to get too comfy. I had to laugh at the irony, despite myself. Yeah, well, that plan sure backfired. I saw something in her eyes, but I couldn't figure out what it was. It seemed like she was looking at me, expecting something but not getting it. Maybe it was anger, maybe it was forgiveness. I don't know. All I know is I was trying to get over the former, but was incapable of giving that latter. The only thing I had to give her was cordiality, even if it was fake. The two of us moved my clothes into the other room as we silently agreed to an unspoken ceasefire. We didn't do any more talking than was absolutely necessary. For the rest of the afternoon, until the twins came home, we existed in a cold but polite atmosphere. She thankfully stepped out to run some errands for a while, and I hung up my clothes in peaceful solitude. It wasn't until we sat the twins down after dinner that the emotional volcano fully erupted. We explained, without really explaining, what was happening between us. Josh and Allie were smart kids. They knew there was something that we weren't telling them. Truth be told, I wanted to spill the beans on Paige. I really did, but I saw no point in it. It wouldn't make their pain go away. In fact, it would add to it. Sure, I would have had a few moments of vindication as they turned on their mother, but it would hurt them more in the long run. They were too young to process that information as an adult would. So, it was best that they thought that this was what happened when mommy and daddy fall out of love. That ate me from the inside out. It killed me to not only have to remain silent in the midst of such cheating, but to also have to co-sign it as I watched my kids crumble. It was a weight that was almost too heavy for me to bear. I avoided making eye contact with Paige. I couldn't do it. I wasn't strong enough to look at her, knowing that all this was her fault, and not lose it. She also instinctively knew to stay away from me after that. No doubt she realized how much I was biting my tongue. Life just wasn't fair. Life dragged along in our household for the next few weeks. I contacted a lawyer who gave me a gloomy picture of what my future held. The good news was there was a decent chance that I wouldn't have to pay any alimony. Paige didn't get paid as much as I did, but she was paid well enough. Throw in the fact that she was the one who cheated, and my lawyer was optimistic that it should be enough to convince a reasonable judge that child support for 2 children was sufficient. It was still a considerable amount of money, but it wasn't just about dollars and cents for me. It was about some sort of justice. Paying alimony to a wife that cheated would be rubbing salt on a very open and painful wound. It felt like rewarding bad behavior. If I had my way, she would be paying me. With good news comes bad. My lawyer said that in order to even be considered for a divorce, we would have to be separated for a year. That meant that we had to live in 2 separate residences. It also meant that we were stuck in this purgatory for another 12 months. So, he drew up a separation agreement instead of a divorce decree. There was a bit of a discussion between the 3 of us, Paige, my lawyer, and myself, about the terms. We settled on a fair payment amount rather quickly, but there were other details that made this conversation heated. The disagreements were mostly about what we were and weren't allowed to do during this time period. Yep, you guessed it. She wanted to be able to date. I wonder who she had in mind. After much debate, we had to settle on what was fair. She had the right to a single life, but I had a right to request that she keep her affair away from the kids. She agreed and quickly signed the papers. Once our names were on the dotted lines, I found a decently priced apartment. I was moved out within 2 weeks. It took us over a decade to build a life together and only half a month to undo it. That hit the kids hard. Paige and I tried to do our best to reiterate to them that they weren't losing me as a parent. Their pleas for us to go back to being a happy family were heartbreaking. I almost felt sorry for Paige. Almost, but not quite. The guilt written on her face as she watched the kids cry and beg was enough to make me believe that there was still a piece of the woman that I married buried in there. She wasn't a complete soulless bitch. After moving out, life was really bleak for me. Coming home to an empty apartment was a daily reminder of how low things were. It got to the point that I made up work to do just so I could stay at the office. One day when I was sitting in my apartment watching my 32-inch TV, I saw a commercial for the gym that Phil recommended. The commercial advertised their judgment-free atmosphere. It showed people of all shapes working out with smiles on their faces and highlighted their various amenities, fitness classes, spa, etc. I fished through my wallet and pulled out the card for the gym that Phil gave me. I Googled the gym to see if I could find reviews. I found dozens of favorable comments. They talked about the courteous staff, the updated workout equipment, and the new spa room that was just built. There were a few comments about particular staff members. For instance, a woman named Naomi seemed to have a small fan club. She got raving reviews about how inspirational she was and how she always went out of her way to help members. I remembered that name from my conversation with Phil. This made me curious. What the hell? I thought as I grabbed my keys. I didn't have anything else to do but wallow around in this apartment. Why not go check it out? The gym was only about 10 minutes away. When I stepped inside, I instantly became self-conscious. There were people in various stages of working out. Many of them seemed to glisten with perspiration as their beautiful bodies glowed. Everyone that I saw seemed to be those people. You know who I am talking about. Those people are the men who lift weights while grunting loudly and standing directly in front of the mirror, or the women who glide effortlessly on the treadmill with their bouncing ponytails and their toned legs. A quick glance down at my protruding belly let me know that I was in the wrong place. I was getting ready to walk out when I heard a pleasant voice ask, "Can I help you?" I turned to see a young woman behind the reception desk. She was an exact replica of the other women that I saw, so I grew even more self-conscious having her actually speak to me. I'll bet she thinks I am a fat slob. No, I was just looking around. Thanks, I said quickly as I turned to shuffle out of the door. If you really want to look around, you should take a tour. We have plenty to offer, she said hurriedly before I disappeared. I am okay. I just think I am in the wrong place. She nodded knowingly. I think you'd be surprised. She insisted. Before I could turn her down again, she said, just take a quick walk with me and look around. If you still feel that you're in the wrong place, I'll let you go. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either. She must have taken this as a good sign, because she came from around the back of the desk and looked me expectantly. I didn't have the heart to say no. I know, I am a big chicken, but it is nearly impossible to say no to a woman who looked like her, especially when she was being so nice. Okay, you win, I said in surrender. Awesome, she said brightly. By the way, I am Naomi. I am the manager here. And you are? She asked as she stuck out her hand for me to shake. Arthur, I answered as I grabbed it. In my head, I thought, of course she's Naomi. Like King Arthur? She asked with interest. I smiled and nodded. At least that's what my parents had in mind when they named me. She laughed aloud. It was a pleasant laugh that made me smile even more. Well, Your Highness, wait here for a second. I have to get someone to cover the desk while we're walking around. Then, I'll be right with you. As she walked away, I couldn't help but to admire her shapely body. She returned a few minutes later with another girl in tow. The other girl smiled at me as she went behind the desk, and Naomi cheerily said, "You ready to go, Arthur?" I followed her on the tour as she basically showed me the same things that I saw on the commercial. Not to say that I wasn't impressed, but it wasn't anything new. I did have the added benefit of it being personalized. She was nice and hot, so rehashing the same information didn't have a negative effect. However, the game changer came when we got to a section of the gym that had a wall filled with photos. It looked like a large collage. Closer inspection showed me that these pictures were actually before and after shots of various people. She stopped and turned to me. "Can I tell you a secret?" I nodded. Then she pointed to one of them and said, "This was me when I first joined the gym." I couldn't stop my jaw from dropping. The picture was of Naomi standing with another man and a young boy. It was a family picture, so I deduced that the other two were her husband and her son. The thing that astounded me was that the Naomi in that picture was at least 200 pounds. I looked at the after shot that was right next to it. It was astounding. She almost looked like a completely different person. When I got pregnant with Henry, she pointed to the small boy in the before picture. I gained a lot of weight. It didn't go away after I had him. Then, one Christmas, my husband bought me a treadmill. She said the word treadmill like it was the worst thing someone could buy. He was trying to be sweet, but all I saw was a fat woman who had to lose weight. I took stock of myself and realized that who I was wasn't who I wanted to be. That's when I decided to do something about it. So, I came to this gym with my brother-in-law. He was the trainer here at the time. With his help, I lost over 75 pounds. Wow, that was all I could say. So, you see, Arthur, you shouldn't feel out of place here. We all have different body shapes, just like we all have different reasons for wanting to be healthy. Many of the people you see here started where you are now. You're here because you belong here. Who knows? Maybe your picture will be up here someday. So, I signed up for a membership. What can I say? She was a good saleswoman. I got a pamphlet with all of the different classes and programs that the gym had and a t-shirt. I signed up for the starter program. It was held twice a week for 2 weeks. One of the trainers showed me how to use the equipment and told me which exercises work what muscles. He also gave tips on maximizing the efficiency of your workout. After that, I signed up for one-on-one time with a guy named Manny, another trainer, every Wednesday at 8 o'clock. He asked what I wanted to gain by coming to the gym and gave me a routine that would accomplish that. I also started to attend the classes that were held there. Some of them I went to religiously, others were just to see if I liked it. The biking class held on Thursday was my favorite. The yoga class was something that sounded good at the time, women in yoga pants doing stretches, but the reality wasn't as much fun as I anticipated. An unexpected benefit came from these classes. I met people like me. It seems that we were all on the same journey and had a lot in common. While the gym kept me sane, things with my estranged wife became seemingly worse. I came to my former home one evening to visit the kids. I still had a key, so it wasn't anything for me to just walk in. When I got there, I found Paige's niece watching the kids. When I asked where Paige was, she became nervous. After putting 2 and 2 together, I deduced that she was out with a guy, probably Derek, the sex god. Needless to say, I wasn't that enthused about sticking around. I didn't come there to see her, but to find out that she was out with a man was blow. However, I stayed because I wanted my kids to see that I was still going to be in their life. So, I paid Penny, niece, and sent her home. Paige came in at around 11 that evening. She almost shit herself when she saw me sitting on the couch. "Artie, what are you doing here?" She looked beautiful. Her short, black cocktail dress accentuated her body. It was slim around her waist, which only highlighted how ample her bust was. It also showed off her sexy calves. It was once my favorite. In contrast to how she was dressed, her hair wasn't neatly done and her makeup was gone. What did this tell me? It told me that she probably spent her night doing other things besides dancing. I swallowed the bile and calmly said, "I just came over to see the kids." I figured that since I was here, there was no reason for Penny to stay. So, I paid her. If I knew how late you'd be, I wouldn't have sent her home. She looked at me as if trying to gauge my mood. I wasn't giving off any emotion. My vibe wasn't angry, sarcastic, or sad. It was empty. If I am honest, I was drained. I was tired of hurting, tired of feeling shitty and rejected. "I didn't know you were here watching them. I am sorry," she said, unable to meet my eyes. I think she knew that I could tell what she was doing when she was out. However, I wasn't sure if she felt guilty or just bad for me. It honestly didn't matter though, did it? I shook my head and got up from the couch. "No worries. Shit happens," I said with an unemotional shrug. Then I walked past her to get out. As I did, I could feel her eyes on me. It felt like she wanted to say something. I don't know what on earth could be said, and honestly, I didn't really want to hear it. As I grabbed my coat, she finally said, "Hey, Artie." I stopped walking, giving her a chance to speak. She stammered. Whatever was going to come out never made it to her mouth. Instead, she simply said, "Thanks for paying, Penny." "No problem. Good night, Paige." I walked out and closed the door behind me. A few months later, the bike machine whirred insistently as I pedaled furiously. My legs were burning and my back was hurting, but I wouldn't let them stop. I wasn't going to give them permission to rest until the digital clock counted down to 0. When I was done, I stepped off the bike with a smile. The display showed that I burned 432 calories. I headed to the locker room with a boost of confidence. I'd been coming to the gym pretty regularly, and I was starting to feel the difference. After a quick shower, I debated stepping on the scale. Curiosity won out in the end, so I did. What I saw made my heart drop. I'd only lost 10 pounds. I should have been happier than I was. I should have celebrated, but I wasn't happy. I was disappointed. After 3 months, I thought that I should have at least lost 20. I dejectedly dressed and stormed out. Once again, life seemed unfair. For me, nothing was easy. Lance skated through life. Paige was going on dates and enjoying her singlehood, and all I got for 3 months of hard sweat was 10 pounds. I almost ran into Naomi. She was carrying an armful of towels. "Oh, I am sorry, Arthur. I didn't see you," she said as she expertly dodged me. I was impressed that she remembered me, but only slightly. My mind was on other things. "No problem," I said with unintentional briskness. I continued to stalk out of the gym until I heard her calling me. I turned to find her jogging up to where I was. "Is everything okay?" she asked with a hint of concern on her face. "Yeah, I am good. Just, I don't know. You want to talk about it?" "No, not really. Not much to talk about. I guess I am just a little disappointed in myself." "Why?" I didn't mean to spill everything about my life. I really didn't. What started out with me telling her about the 10 pounds turned into a half-hour-long discussion about Paige, me, my kids, and even Lance. To her credit, she listened. She even had the good graces not to look bored. "Wow, that's heavy," she said when I finally gave her a moment to chime in. Then, after a second or two, she asked, "What is it that you want, Arthur?" It was a fairly simple question, one that should have had a simple answer, but there wasn't one. Truth is, I hadn't really stopped to think about what I wanted. She saw my indecision and asked, "Do you want to win your wife back? Do you want to make her jealous and regret losing you? Are you trying to catch up to your brother? What is it that you want? Why are you here?" I thought about that for a moment. As ridiculous as it sounds, I kind of wanted all those things. Yet, at the same time, I didn't really want any of them. I just want to feel good about myself. I said truthfully, "Well, you won't find that here," she said with an indiscernible expression on her face. I was a little surprised to hear her say that. She continued her. "People think that coming to the gym and losing a bunch of weight will make them happier, or better people, but it doesn't. Trust me, you can work out all day long. You can lose 100 pounds, but feeling good about yourself comes from the inside. If it comes from how you look, then it's shallow. That's not real self-esteem. You have to know what you're worth, no matter how you look." I snorted. "Easy for you to say. You look like that," I said as I waved my hand over her body. "Besides, your husband didn't reject you when you got fat." "No, he didn't. He accepted me for who I was, even when I was at my worst. You know what had happened, though? I almost threw it all away because I didn't believe I was worth it. I thought my looks were the best thing I had going. When I lost that, I lost a part of myself." For the first time, she didn't have that radiant smile on her face. She looked haunted. Once I started to lose weight, I became more confident. When I noticed what effect I had on the men around me, I felt powerful. What I didn't realize was that was all a facade. The ugliness that I'd buried within myself was still there. I hadn't got rid of it. I just covered it up with shallow acts of superiority to prove to myself that I was special. Deep down, I knew the truth. I didn't deserve my husband. I didn't deserve the love that he gave me. Her story felt so real to me. I felt like I was going through it with her. As she spoke, the emotions of that time came through in her words. She had me captivated. After a while, those feelings began to manifest themselves again. She continued, "In order to squash them back down, I had to do more things to feel special. Let's just say that in the end, I almost lost my family because I was more focused on outside affirmation than I was on figuring out why I felt unworthy of my husband. So, what am I supposed to do? I don't know anymore. All I know is that I am lonely. I am working late and hanging out at a gym because I don't want to go home. At the end of the day, it all boils down to one fact. My wife doesn't want me. How do you feel good about yourself when the one person that you love doesn't give a shit about you? She looked at me thoughtfully. Then she said, "Wait here, Arthur. I'll be right back." She lightly jogged off towards a staff-only area. She came back with a card. "Tomorrow, I want you to call this guy. His name is Jerry. He's my brother-in-law, the one that I told you about. He trained me when he was a trainer here. Now, he's a personal trainer and life coach. He doesn't come cheap, but luckily for you, he has a soft spot for me. We are family, after all. I'll talk to him tonight to see if there's anything he can do for you. You and he can discuss the rest when you call." I took the card and looked at it. "Wow, thanks. I don't know what to say," I said with genuine appreciation. She shrugged her shoulders like it was nothing. "Don't worry about it. I know what it's like to just need someone to give a crap about you. We've all been there. Just do me one small favor." "What's that?" "If I convince Jerry to take you on as a client, give him your all. Don't go into it half-assed. I am calling in a favor that he owes me, so please make it worth it." I was touched that she would do all of that for a guy that she barely knew. "Why are you doing this for me?" I asked with slight skepticism. She cocked her head to the side, as if looking at me from another angle. "Because, despite what your wife thinks, I do think you're worth the trouble. I see you in here working out. I see you interacting with the other people. You're a hard worker, but you're also kind, courteous, and a real gentleman. You open doors for ladies when they're behind you, and you don't look at their butts when they pass by. I've met my fair share of creeps, trust me. I've met enough to know a good guy when I see one." Her words really touched me. I was a man who was having a tough time dealing with the rejection of my wife. To hear that another woman noticed me enough to list my good attributes was therapeutic. Without realizing it, I hugged her. She was surprised at first and let out a "oh" when I grabbed her, but then she returned it with a friendly pat on the back. When I let go, she said, "You're gonna be okay. For what it's worth, your wife lost out big." She patted my cheek and smiled. "Good luck, King Arthur." Then she walked off. I met Jerry a week later. He was different than I imagined. Physically, he was what I had in mind. He looked a lot like Lance, kind of. He was more toned and defined, whereas Lance was bigger. I was immediately envious and intimidated by him, but his personality was nothing like I expected. Half of me expected him to be comforting and nurturing like Naomi. The other half was looking for him to be Lance. Cocky, self-absorbed, and laid back. After all, he was just a fitness trainer. He didn't have a real job. Well, you know what they say about assumptions. He was so professional that he was almost cold. He didn't really talk much. When we spoke on the phone, he told me that he spoke to Naomi about taking me on as a client. He wanted to know more about me before he did that. He told me that we needed to set up a face-to-face. He wanted to meet me at my apartment. That was a bit strange to me. I would have thought he would prefer a neutral place, or maybe even an office, but he apparently had other ideas. When he came into my place and introduced himself, he made himself at home. I mean, he literally walked around like he had full rights to invade my privacy. He went into my kitchen and looked in my cabinets and fridge, went into bathroom and opened my medicine cabinet. He even walked into my bedroom and peeked under the bed. Then he asked me a bunch of invasive questions. He wanted to know what kind of foods I ate, what I liked to watch on TV, my work schedule. He even wanted to know the last time I had sex. When all of that was over, he sat me down. "Okay, Arthur, I've decided to take you on as a client. I have to admit that the only reason I am doing it is because my sister-in-law pleaded a pretty good case for you. That, and I owe her a favor. She often lets me use her gym for free to entertain clients. The least I can do for her is take on a client or two pro bono." "Wow, that would be great. Thank you." He laughed and shook his head. "Don't thank me yet, King Arthur," he said in a sarcastic tone, indicating that he knew of Naomi's nickname for me. No doubt he disagreed with my deserving it. "If we get through the first couple of weeks without you quitting on me, I'll be surprised." That doesn't sound very encouraging," I said. This got another laugh. "I wasn't trying to encourage you, Your Highness. I was warning you. You see, I find that people who pay for something do so because they really want it. If they get it for free, it loses value. They feel entitled to it. My clients pay a lot for my services because they genuinely want to change. You? Well, you're getting the Naomi discount. I don't know how motivated you are, but we'll find out soon enough. I own you now. Your body belongs to me. You'll do what I say, when I say it. No questions asked. The first time you talk back, disobey, or refuse me, we're done. Got it?" "Yeah, got it," I said. I was a little miffed by his smug, contentious attitude. If he noticed it, he let it slide. Good. Now, do you have any vacation time coming up? Yeah. Can you take a week off? I nodded. He pulled out his phone and did a couple of things on it. Do that. Take a week off from work and let me know the dates. Then, I want you eat anything and everything that you think you'll miss. Do it before that week. Enjoy yourself. Once we get started, things will change big time. With that cryptic message, he left. A-hole. I thought as I closed the door behind him. I wish that I heeded Jerry's warning more carefully. To say that he was strict would be an understatement. On the very first day of my vacation, I met with a nutritionist. She was a pleasant-looking woman who looked like she probably weighed all of 100 pounds. I spent an entire day with her going over facts about how the body breaks food down. It sounded like stuff that you would learn in any decent nutrition class, but it was more focused towards weight loss. Then, we went through eating. More importantly, how to eat. She showed me what to look for in food labels, how to count my daily calorie intake, what the best sources for protein and vitamins are, and what was considered a balanced meal. It was a pretty eye-opening day. When I was done with her, I realized a few things about how I viewed food. In short, I ate for fun rather than for fuel. If I was bored, I ate. If I craved a certain type of food, I ate it whether I was hungry or not. If the food tasted good, I continued to eat it until it was gone. The next day, Jerry took me grocery shopping. Let me tell you, there is nothing more depressing than realizing that 90% of the grocery store was off limits to me. Even things that I thought were healthy weren't. He wouldn't let me buy diet sodas, microwavable meals, even if it was a low-calorie meal, or any type of bread, not even wheat. The next project was going through a bunch of cookbooks and learning how to make meals. I wasn't allowed to eat anything that I didn't make on the stove. In fact, he said that I could only use the microwave for what it was made for, warming food up. This meant that the food that went into the microwave had to be previously cooked by me using ingredients that I prepared. I spent the entire time off from work being perpetually hungry. I felt like I was going starved to death. The meals that I made were either inedible or just plain nasty. I suffered through it, choking down what things I could eat. I had to stay away from TV. The commercials were the worst. I didn't realize how many commercials have food in them. It was torture. A funny thing happened, though. I started to pay more attention to the cookbooks. I looked up meals on the internet. I watched cooking shows on TV. Eventually, I found food that was in my skill set to make. Was I a chef? Hell no. But before the week was up, I was able to make meals suitable for human consumption. They may not have been gourmet, but I wasn't on the verge of starvation. The celebration of that victory was short-lived, because that's when the workout started. Unlike the amateur workouts that I did before, these were tailor-made to make my body suffer in the worst possible ways. Jerry went with me to the gym twice a week after I got off work. We worked out for 2 hours. I spent 30 minutes on the treadmill as a warm-up. Then, we hit the weights for an hour. The last 30 minutes were spent in the spa area, relaxing. On top of his 2 workouts a week, he told me that I had to work out at least 2 more days. It didn't have to be at the gym. It could be any activity that got the blood racing. He told me that he would be keeping an eye out to make sure that I didn't lie to him about it. At any moment, he could do a spot check. He also said that sex didn't count as a physical activity. I couldn't tell if he was being facetious or not. However, when I jokingly told him that wouldn't be a problem, he didn't laugh. No sense of humor, I guess. So, on top of always being hungry, I was exhausted. My entire body ached constantly. It became difficult to walk or lift things. All I wanted to do when I got home was stay in bed. But even that wasn't possible. I was a father. I had to make sure to squeeze in time with the kids whenever it was possible. I didn't want to disappear from their lives, so I had to suck it up. I was grateful that Paige went out of her way to make it easier on me to spend time with them. She didn't object to me dropping by the house, even if it was unexpected. Part of her gracious attitude could have been born from guilt, but I felt that she truly wanted to do what was best for the kids. They needed me to be a constant presence in their lives, and she was more than accommodating. She even went as far as to insist that I keep the house key. I think the implied agreement was that I respect her privacy. This is where I admit that I didn't keep up my end of that unspoken treaty. I am not proud of it, but I fell victim to the green-eyed monster of jealousy. It started out as innocent curiosity. I idly snooped around when there was little risk of me getting caught. I wasn't looking for anything in particular, just getting a sense of how things were going in my absence. The first thing that struck me as strange was the unfamiliar toothbrush in the master bathroom. I didn't really put much stock in that at first. It wasn't until I saw men's body wash in the shower that I started to freak out. I didn't find any men's clothes in her closet, but I did see a pair of boxer shorts in her laundry basket. I can't tell you what ran through my mind as I looked at another man's underwear amongst my wife's lingerie. It was a violation. This guy kept pushing his way further and further into my space and marking it for his territory. I swallowed my anger. No matter what I found when Paige wasn't looking, I pretended that nothing was wrong. For one, I didn't want her to know that I was snooping around. I figured I could gather more info if she was oblivious. The other reason why I didn't press anything was plain old pride. I wanted to be detached and aloof, like nothing she did bothered me. I did question my kids about any strange things happening lately with mommy. The most important strange thing was any new people visiting. They didn't know what I was talking about, so I had to assume that Paige kept her end of the deal and didn't let it get to the kids. More than likely, their playtime happened on dates or at the house before the kids made it home from school. Until she violated that, she did nothing wrong. As much as I pretended that nothing hurt me, I wasn't sure that Paige was convinced. It's near impossible to hide pain for the long haul. There were a few instances when she would get this apologetic look on her face when she caught me looking at her. Watching her move forward so effortlessly while I remained stuck in a quagmire of regret was painful. There were a few times that it was too much for me to gloss over. The workouts with Jerry helped a lot. Listening to him bark at me while I was on the bench press, or having him slap me in the stomach as I did sit-ups took my mind off of Paige. Even his condescending jabs at my nickname focused my negative energy away from my problems. Apart from that, I went to work and did my job. As it is with many men in my situation, my office became a place of refuge. Here, I was valued. I think that's why men throw themselves into their jobs when their marriages fail. At work, you are judged by your performance. There is a quantitative number that shows how well or how poorly you do. If numbers are good, you are praised. If they aren't, you are reprimanded. If there is a problem, you simply find it, eliminate it, and replace the missing component with a better one. If only marriages worked like that. Months flew by in an eye blink, yet every second dragged endlessly. They were filled with pain, agony, and torture. But not all pain is bad. Sometimes, it just lets you know that you're alive. The human body is an amazing thing. It has the capacity to heal itself, even though you don't realize it's happening. It adapts to a hostile environment, making it stronger and better equipped to deal with the conditions. For instance, it builds muscle to overcome weakness when it is forced to lift things that are too heavy for it. It makes the lungs more tolerable to breathing heavier when it is forced to run more. It makes the heart stronger so that it can supply more blood to a body that needs it to keep up rigorous activity. It becomes insensitive to certain pain, and it stops registering it as such. This also applies emotionally. I didn't realize it, but something was happening beneath the surface. The downfall of my marriage hurt a little bit less each time I had to deal with a symptom of it. Bit by bit, piece by piece, my heart started to become numb to state of my estrangement. Things in me and Paige's dynamic shifted. It happened so subtly that I didn't even realize it. Like an unwatched clock, the tiny movements remained unnoticed until they were summed up to showcase a significant change. The shift didn't become apparent until we were a couple weeks shy of our separation anniversary. The kids were asleep upstairs, and I was in the living room waiting for her to come home so that I could leave. During the evening, I spilled some soda on my shirt. It was fairly new. My old clothes were becoming a little loose on me, so I wanted to wash it right away to avoid a permanent stain. I figured I could pop it in the washer and dryer. Paige's dates usually ended around 11 or so she wouldn't be home for a while. I was wrong. By the time I heard her keys in the front door, my shirt was still in the dryer. I instantly became self-conscious and bolted for the kitchen to recover it. I decided to simply put my shirt on, even if it wasn't dry. I desperately wanted to keep her eyes off my naked chest. I couldn't stand any more of her judgments. Do you know how hard it is to untwist a wet shirt? When she found me in the kitchen, I was urgently trying to untangle it. I didn't even realize she was behind me until I heard her feet shuffle and then suddenly stop. I swung around to find her staring at me open-mouthed. Her wide eyes roamed up and down my body, like she was seeing something that wasn't supposed to be there. I became even more anxious under her eyes, so I just lifted my misshapen shirt to cover my modesty. Hey Paige, how was your night? I nervously asked, pretending to be casual. What I really wanted was for her to stop looking at me, or to at least say something. It was fine, she said slowly, not averting her eyes. Oh, okay. What else could I say? I felt beads of sweat collecting on my forehead, despite the 70 degrees that was displayed on the thermostat. I could hear her thoughts radiating from her. Her crude comparison to how I didn't measure up to her sex god were in her eyes. It took every ounce of pride that I had left to not go running from the room. Instead, I held my head high and said, "Well, the kids are in bed. They ate dinner and did their homework. I'll be off now. If you don't mind, I'm gonna use your bathroom before I leave." With that, I rushed from the kitchen. When I got to the bathroom, I finished getting the shirt untangled. Before I put it on, I got a glimpse in the mirror. Then, my mouth dropped much like Paige's had. What I saw shocked me. The bathroom in my apartment had a simple mirror outside of the medicine cabinet. It was only adequate in showing just enough to allow you to shave and comb your hair. After my crushing disappointment the last time I stepped on the scale, I was perfectly fine with missing out on whatever my minuscule mirror didn't show me. The last thing I wanted to do was look at myself. I preferred to remain in ignorant bliss. It was safer that way. But this mirror practically covered the wall above the sink. My entire torso was reflected back to me, and it was enough to stop me short. My chest was separated into two distinct bulges. My midsection was slimmer, and the pockets of extra fat that was once sticking out were flattened. My shoulders protruded out. Overall, it looked like my body started small at my waist and gradually got wider until it reached my shoulders. The man in the mirror wasn't destined to appear on any fitness magazines, but his body was a far cry from the out-of-shape one that last appeared. I was looking at a guy who was attractive, and that guy was me. Was this why Paige was staring at me? She wasn't looking at me in disgust. She was looking at me because she was attracted to me. That moment, standing in Paige's bathroom, was one of the most iconic in my life. It was the first moment that I actually felt worthy. When I left the bathroom, I strolled past her and said, "All right, Paige, I am off. You have a good night." Her eyes lingering on me didn't go unnoticed. This time, I didn't shy away from it. I embraced it, though I pretended like I didn't notice it. Good night, Artie," she said in a meek voice. With an extra swagger in my step, I sauntered from her eyesight and closed the front door behind me. After my awakening in Paige's bathroom, I was on the lookout for all the changes that I'd made without realizing it. I was constantly comparing myself to when I first started. Some of them were big things. For instance, I paid more attention to my clothes when I shopped. The collar of my dress shirts didn't fit snugly around my neck anymore. I also went from a 44 waistline to a 36. Other things weren't so noticeable, but were still very encouraging. I was able to bend down and get up quicker. I could sit down and tie my shoes without having to spread my legs far apart to accommodate my belly. I could also get in and out of my car without grunting. Jerry found a rejuvenated Arthur the next time we met. All the fatigue seemed to melt away. The weights felt lighter, the treadmill wasn't such an unslayable dragon, and my energy was through the roof. I found myself constantly looking in the mirror while I was working out. I couldn't tear myself away. During one of my routines, Jerry noticed it and got a kick out of it. I see someone finally realize the results of all of his hard work. I couldn't help but to laugh. "Okay, you caught me." I did. Go on. Have a look-see. Ogle yourself." He made an exaggerated show of stepping to the side to give me a better view. "I am not in your way, am I handsome?" "No, you aren't a-hole." "Thanks for asking, though," I said as I had to stop lifting because I was laughing too hard. "Anytime, Your Highness. I am never one to stand in the way of love at first sight." That was the first time he said, "Your Highness," without the snarky overtone. Joking around with him felt strange, but nice. It was a side that I rarely saw. Usually he spoke like he loathed my existence. He reminded me of the drill sergeant in Full Metal Jacket. I half expected him to tell me to lower my neck because I wasn't worth the energy of him raising his hand to choke me. Another significant change that I noticed once I started paying attention was how people interacted with me. They were more pleasant. They looked at me for a split second longer as they passed me. They even smiled more. Sounds like bullshit? I would have thought so too before I lost weight. At first I thought it was my imagination, but the more I paid attention to it, the less I couldn't refute it. Have you ever noticed that attractive people get better treatment? How many times has a pretty woman gotten a warning when she was stopped by a traffic cop? Very often. So much so that it's running joke. It's actually proven that better-looking people get lighter sentences when they go to court. Pretty people are even described differently. If a guy is described as a good guy with a great sense of humor, then he is probably unattractive. If he's attractive, then he is sexy, funny, and charming. Physical beauty is the difference between having a great personality and being a great catch. It's astounding how shallow the world is. Paige was no different. Ever since that night at her house, I found her eyes lingering on me whenever I came over. She smiled more and slowly brushed her hair from her face. Her voice was lighter. She stopped looking at me like she felt sorry for me and started to treat me with respect. Everything came to a head on the anniversary, separation anniversary, not wedding. I'd previously contacted my lawyer and gave him the green light on getting the paperwork prepared. I wanted it printed and ready so that Paige and I could begin to move on. On the morning of, I swung by and picked them up. I could have had her served, but that felt too impersonal. Paige and I were in a good place, so I figured that there was no need to do that. I felt that the end of our marriage deserved the same respect that the beginning had, at least from me. So, I planned on giving them to her when I went to see the kids that night. I found her in the upstairs bedroom getting ready for what looked like another date. She was looking in the mirror and putting earrings in. The door was open, so I lightly knocked on the doorframe to let her know I was there. "Oh, hey Artie," she said as she turned around. She spread her arms and looked at me expectantly before asking, "How do I look?" "Hey Paige, you look beautiful, but I am sure you knew that. Going out?" Her eyes did that roving thing that they'd been doing lately whenever she looked at me. "No, just trying on clothes to see how they fit. You remember this dress?" I took a moment to really look at it, and then I burst out laughing. "Isn't that the dress I bought you for your birthday? What was it, 8 years ago?" She smiled brightly and laughed too. "It was 9 years. Remember? I saw it in the window and told you that I liked it. You said that we couldn't afford it, but you neglected to tell me that you got that promotion. Then you surprised me by coming home with it and giving me the news." "I remember," I said as a nostalgic smile spread across my face. We went out that night to that new Italian restaurant. Her eyes disconnected from me as a shy look came across her face. That's also the night we conceived the twins. Pleasant memories swarmed me. I remembered being intertwined in her arms for the rest of that night. With as much sex as we had that night, there was no way for her to not get pregnant. Suddenly, those blissful memories morphed into something wicked, wiping the smile from my face. I saw me, fumbling around her desperately trying to please a woman who was barely awake. Then I disappeared from that picture altogether, and another man replaced me. I didn't remember what Derek looked like. I hadn't seen him since that day, but his likeness will forever haunt me. Suddenly, he began having sex with her. The entire mood of the room changed. Elephants the size of bulldozers cursed us for ignoring them. With a shake of my head, I snapped out of my reverie and coolly said, "I have something for you." With that, I dropped the manila envelope on the bed. When she looked at it, her face darkened. "Wow, you didn't waste any time getting that whipped up, did you?" "Well, I did take an entire year." I joked in an attempt to lighten the heavy mood. I expected a laugh, a smile or something. Instead, she just turned back to the mirror with a blank expression as if the papers weren't important. "I'll look at them when I get a chance," she said in a deadpan voice, as if she were shooing me off. I silently left the room. Her reaction was puzzling. I didn't expect a parade, but I at least thought she'd be happy to get this process started. I went to search for the twins. The first one I found was Josh, who was playing video games in his room. "Tell me you have your homework done," I said sternly after clearing my throat to get his attention. He quickly whipped his head around in my direction. His open-mouthed face and jumpy reaction forecasted his guilt, even before he opened his mouth to speak. "Almost," he said in a small voice, looking away. When his eyes caught mine and he saw the look on my face, he said, "I think I'll turn this off and finish it." "Good choice." He pouted and whispered something under his breath as he begrudgingly did as he was told. I pretended that I didn't hear him fussing me out in a murmured voice. I felt that I should leave before I witnessed him doing or saying something that I would have to punish him for. Sometimes, you have to save your kids from you. So I want to go find Allie. She was in the living room going through a photo album. I recognized the pure white cover with Mr. and Mrs. McCormick written in beautiful, black calligraphy. It was me and Paige's wedding album. There was no need to question her about homework. She always did hers. So I just sat next to her on the couch and put my arm around her. "Hey pumpkin, what ya looking at?" I asked. "Just you and Mommy's wedding pictures." She flipped through a few pages, then stopped at one. "You look just the same as you did here," she said as she pointed to a picture of me and Lance standing side by side in our tuxedos. Naturally, he was my best man. I smiled when I gazed at the man on his wedding day. His smile was from ear to ear. He had the face of an optimistic youth. There were no problems in his way, only opportunities. This man truly believed that love would conquer all. How naive was he? Really? I was really young then. I commented to her. "Yep, you do. Especially since you lost all that weight. You look really handsome now." "So, I wasn't handsome before?" I asked jokingly. I couldn't help but laugh as she struggled to find a way to get her foot out of her mouth. After a few amusing seconds, I let her off the hook. Just messing with you, sweetie. Thank you for the compliment. She smiled and leaned into my chest. Then, a thoughtful expression clouded her face before she asked, "Are you and Mommy ever gonna get back together?" I sighed. This was one of those times when you are tempted to lie to a child, just so you can avoid an uncomfortable conversation. I hated putting them through this. They didn't deserve any of this. "No, sweetie, I don't think so," I said truthfully, remembering the papers that were probably still sitting on Paige's bed. "Why not?" she asked. "Because sometimes adults realize that they can't stay married. It doesn't stop us from loving our kids, though." "So, you and Mommy don't love each other anymore?" she said, catching what I was trying to gloss over. I should have known that she wouldn't fall for the deflection. She was a sharp one. "We care a lot for each other. We want what's best for the other person, but we don't love each other like husband and wife. That's why we have to split up. But we'll always be the best of friends." Allie pursed her lips sadly and looked away. I kissed her on the forehead reassuringly, but it felt as insignificant in the face of her questions as a fly is to a rhino. I knew that my answers were unsatisfactory, but they were the best ones I could give. How do you explain divorce to a 9-year-old? To them, everything is supposed to be simple. If you love each other, you stay married. Period. They don't understand all the complexities that life has. Then again, why isn't life and love that simple? I thought it was at one time. Then Hurricane Derek hit the shore and changed everything. I felt a presence in the room and turned just in time to see Paige walking away. As Allie and I continued perusing through the album, I wondered how much of our conversation was overheard. A few nights later, I decided to attend the weekly biking class. I hadn't been in a while since I started working out with Jerry, so I saw a few unfamiliar faces. My eyes fell on one that I knew from when I went to class faithfully, so I took the bike next to her. "Hey, Colleen," I said cheerily. She turned to face me. When she recognized who I was, a beautiful smile spread across her face. "Arthur, long time no see. I almost didn't recognize you since you went and got all skinny. You too good to work out with us? Where have you been?" She said as her eyes scoured me with appreciation. I blushed bashfully. "I've been working out here. I didn't go anywhere. How have we not bumped into each other?" "Like I said, you're too good to work out with us fatties," she said as she nudged me playfully. You are definitely not fat. Trust me," I said as I looked her over from head to toe. When I met her eyes and realized that I was checking her out so blatantly, I became shy again. I didn't know whether to apologize or just pretend it didn't happen. Luckily, the trainer saved me from further embarrassment by starting class. After class was over, Colleen walked past me, brushing my shoulder as she did so. "Don't be a stranger," she said as she sashayed from the room. Could she be flirting with me? I thought so, but I wasn't sure. I'd been married for the past decade. I didn't know how to flirt, or how to recognize the signs of a woman flirting with me. Over the next few weeks, I attended that class just to have interaction with her. Each time things went the same. I was becoming convinced that she was interested in me, and I toyed with the idea of asking her out. Unfortunately, I was having trouble gathering the courage to take the next step. Every time I saw her, I thought to myself, this is the time I go for it. But when that moment came, I punked out. Jerry caught me checking her out a few times. He never asked about it, or gave any indication that he knew what was going on. But he did. One day, Colleen just walked up to me out of the blue. She looked a little confused as she said, your friend over there told me that you had something to ask me." She used her thumb to point behind her. I followed the direction of her finger until I saw Jerry standing off in the distance. He winked and smiled at me. "Screw Jerry." Yeah," I stammered. She looked at me expectantly, waiting me out. I finally decided to just go for it. So I said, "I was wondering about us doing something together sometime." Her face looked contemplative at first, so I expected her to say no and add some lame excuse to ease the rejection. To my surprise, she smiled brightly at me as she asked, "Are you asking me out?" Her enthusiastic response gave me courage, so I confidently said, "Yeah, I am. Would you like to go out with me?" She pulled out a piece of paper with her number. "Call me tonight." She saw the confusion on my face and laughed. "Your friend already told me that you were interested. He and I made a bet. He bet that you were too much of a, chicken shit to ask me out." "Really?" I asked as I glared over her shoulder at Jerry. She laughed. "Yep, but I had faith in you. Thanks for not letting me down. Now, I am $10 richer, and it's all thanks to you. Glad I could help. Anytime I can turn him into a loser, let me know." We both laughed at that. Then she said, "Well, I have to get going. You can call me anytime after 8. Will do." She gave me a last smile as she walked off. As she did, Jerry strolled over with a knowing look on his face. What did she want?" he asked, playing dumb. "You'll never believe it. She came all the way over here to tell me how much of an intrusive a hole you are." He laughed and shrugged his shoulders. "Been called worse," he said as he dodged the towel that I threw at him. Later that night, I realized I had another problem. I hadn't been out on a first date in over a decade. I had no idea where to take Colleen, or what to expect. Were the rules still the same as they were when I was courting Paige? My mind raced with questions and expectations. Do we go to the movies, or out to eat? Maybe bungee jumping? Hell, I don't know. I asked around. Surprisingly, the person with the best advice was Lance. "I always take a girl somewhere that isn't obvious. Dinners and movies are boring first dates that will get you friend-zoned quickly. You want to stand out." I find that the best way to do that is to do something that allows you to teach her something. I often take my dates to the gun range or the batting cage. Excite them every time. I thought about it, but I couldn't find anything that I could teach her. When I told him this, he thought for a moment and said, "Well, do something that both of you are good at. Didn't you say you met her in a biking class? Take her for a bike ride." "Bike ride? Where? Isn't there a bike trail in those mountains that everyone goes to?" When I asked Colleen if she would like to do that, she was excited about it. So that Saturday afternoon, we packed our bikes in my SUV and headed for the trail. What seemed like a good idea quickly backfired. While it was a pleasant day, bike riding on the first date turned out to be a sweaty way to get to know each other. On top of that, there was no room for small talk. When we did take a break, it was still difficult to a meaningful conversation started. We were busy trying to catch our breaths and rehydrate. I was afraid that this date was a bust. Paige's taunt about me being boring came back to haunt me as I struggled to find something interesting to talk about. But I had nothing. Then something strange happened. Just when I was about to consider this a failed date, a kid came running up to us. His was panicked and yelling something incoherent. I was trying to calm him down so that he could speak more clearly, but he was in such a tizzy that his words were coming out in jumbled sounds. His antics started to draw a crowd as two other bikers stopped to see what was going on. They were having just as hard a time understanding him as I did. Finally, the boy just gave up with a frustrated groan and waved us in his direction, telling us to follow him. When we got to the area he was trying to lead us, he pointed at the ground. I saw a man lying on his stomach, desperately clutching an arm that belonged to a person that was dangling over the edge of a very steep cliff. "They're over there. Please, help them," he cried desperately. My brain immediately went into action. "Dude," I said, tapping the guy next to me. "I'll grab him. You two, grab the kid." Colleen stood back as the three of us pulled them to safety. The most heartwarming sight you ever want to see is a son gratefully hugging a father who saved his life. The father was too tired to even hug his son back. He just laid there, whispering something in his son's ear. The next thing we knew, he was unconscious. Colleen had already called 911. When the cops arrived with an ambulance behind them, the three of us were trying to revive him. We were unsuccessful and growing worried. The EMTs took over, and we got out of their way as they worked. The police officers asked us a series of questions before thanking us for our quick thinking. Before we left, I looked on the ground and found a cell phone. I figured that it must have fallen out of man's pocket. The EMTs were too busy with the man and his son, so I went through it. Once I found a promising contact that said, "Kara, wife," I made a quick call to let her know what was going on and where the guy was being taken. Then, I gave the phone to one of police officers before they took off. I thought the date was ruined, but Colleen was excited. She seemed to have renewed life in her. "Oh my God, you saved that guy and his kid. You saved their lives," she gushed with awe. "Well, it was really all three of us," I said humbly. She shook that off. "You didn't even think about it. You just ordered those other two guys to get the kid, and you dropped down to pull the guy to safety. You're a hero. That was the bravest thing I ever saw." At the end of the date, I got a smoldering kiss goodbye and a pretty good feeling about a second date. There was indeed a second date. We did a more traditional one this time. It gave us a chance to talk more and get to know each other. I told her about my kids, and she told me about hers. She had two boys, one of which was in high school. We reluctantly ended that date much like the first, with us making out on her front porch. It was on the third date a week later that I was faced with my biggest insecurity, courtesy of my ex-wife. It started out just as wonderful as the previous one. In fact, it went a little too well. It was Valentine's Day, and Colleen and I decided to go see a movie. The movie we chose was 50 Shades of Grey. That movie really got her going. The sex scenes were intense. I felt her reaching for my hand during it, and taking extra opportunities to rub her skin against mine. The chemistry between us was palpable. I could feel it shifting into something more than casual. When I dropped her off at her place, she told me in a not-so-subtle way that her kids were with their father for the weekend, and she wanted to invite me up for a nightcap. Her eyes and her body language told me what was on her mind. Sounds like a victory, right? It should have been, but the entire time, I was hearing Paige's taunts. You are an overweight man whose idea of lovemaking is 2 pumps and an apology. I definitely wasn't going to tell you that your sad attempt at seduction is a pitiful 5 minutes of lazy sex. A girl needs something to work with. If you really saw me and Derek this afternoon, then you would have seen what kind of woman I am when I have a man who actually knows what he's doing. They played over and over in my head. I tried to force them down, but I couldn't. When Colleen was eager to have sex with me, I felt suffocated. I was not ready for the sex. I felt like I was drowning in a sea of self-pity. She stopped in mid and looked down. Then she tilted her head up and met my eyes with confusion on her face. Is everything okay? She asked in a small voice. That was it for me. I was done, with tears barely being held back. I am sorry, Colleen. I have to go. I think I am not yet ready. With that, I grabbed my keys and rushed out of her apartment, leaving her frustrated and bewildered. If I had my way, I would have avoided the gym altogether. My sexual debacle with Colleen brought back all those horrible feelings of inadequacy that I had to suffer through when I saw Paige having sex with another man. I couldn't stand to look her in the eyes knowing that she'd been a witness to my deepest shame. Unfortunately, there was no way to avoid the gym. Not with Sergeant Jerry calling the shots. In order to convince him to give me a reprieve, I would have to explain what happened. Even then, there was no guarantee that he would be sympathetic to my plight. Sympathy would require a heart that did more than pump blood to his Captain America muscles. Besides, I would sooner stick a rusty fork in my eye than ever tell anyone about that night. So, while I couldn't avoid the gym, I could avoid Colleen. Whenever I saw her, I pretended not to notice. If she was coming in my direction, my eyes would conveniently be diverted to focus my attention on something else. I stuck to Jerry's side and did my workouts with tunnel vision. Childish? Maybe. But it was the only way to survive the humiliation of that night. Unfortunately, these antics did little to solve the actual problem that I was facing. Quite the contrary. That night with Colleen marked the resurrection of 2 ugly demons that Paige had given birth to. No, I am not talking about my kids, they're precious angels. I am talking about nasty demons. Ones that are capable of destroying the most powerful men and reducing them to empty shells. Their names are insecurity and mistrust. These creatures continually whispered in my ear, driving me slightly insane with paranoia. Whenever I saw Colleen talking to someone, they would convince me that she was talking about me. I would occasionally see her laughing with another woman, and my 2 dark passengers would laugh with her, as if the 4 of them were sharing a joke at my expense. Worthless, impotent, boring little man. Did she tell people about me? Were they laughing at me? These unfounded suspicions made me feel more isolated than I was before. I grew pensive each time I went to the gym. I became angrier and angrier whenever I saw her. Pretty soon, I went from passively ignoring her to overtly snubbing her. The butterfly effect that this had on my workouts was noticeable. I wasn't pushing as hard as I was before. Jerry noticed it, and he wasn't happy about it at all. I actually think that pissed off is a more accurate term. Come on, King Arthur. Earn that nickname. What's been up with you lately? He yelled one day when I stepped off the treadmill before my time was up. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with a dry part of my shirt. I am just not feeling it today, I said between pants as I gasped for breath. He gave me an incredulous look. Not feeling it today? I am sorry, Your Highness. Would you like to retire to the royal chambers to nap? My irritation with him was reaching its apex. I'd endured his disrespect and his contemptuous jabs at Naomi's nickname for me the entire time I'd known him. I stood silent whenever he made a reference to me getting his precious services for free. I took everything that he gave me, and I did it with a smile on my face. I'd had enough. Back off, Jerry. I am not in the mood for your shit. You ever get that feeling of instant regret the moment something leaves your mouth? The statement came out with much more force than I intended. Every syllable hung heavy in the air, making the atmosphere around us thick with tension. His open-mouthed expression and loss for words made me feel the need to backpedal. I didn't mean it like that, I said in a softer voice, trying to tone down the harshness. I'm just going through a lot right now. I need a little break. That's all. He nodded his head as he looked at me with a smile that wasn't really a smile. It was more like a thin ice warning sign. Then he scoffed and said, So, what? You want to just take a break and call me in a couple of weeks when you're feeling better? I knew he was being sarcastic. I am not an idiot. The tone of his voice told me that saying yes to his rhetorical question wouldn't end with us having a hearty handshake. But if I am honest, his suggestion sounded perfect. It wasn't really asking him for too much. At least that's what I thought. I just wanted him to dial down the drill sergeant routine a bit. I just need you to ease up a bit. That's all. He looked like he was about to explode. But then, something changed inside of him. To my surprise, he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Sure. Why not?" "Really?" "Yeah, that's cool," he said nonchalantly as he picked up his towel. "Obviously, you can't deal with your shit. I don't want to waste my time with someone who can't get his shit together. So why don't we just call this the end of our workouts together? That way, I can give more attention to paying clients who actually give a shit." "What the hell, Jerry?" I said disbelievingly as he brushed past me and started to walk off. He ignored me and kept going, so I had to chase him down and run in front of him to stop him. "So, I need one day and you just drop me? After all the hard work that I gave you, you just treat me like I am not even worth a second chance." Once again, he pushed past me and continued to pretend that I was an annoying fly that kept buzzing around his head. As I watched his retreating figure, I grew angrier. Finally, I yelled out, "You know what? Screw you. You're no better than my selfish bitch of a wife." He stopped and turned around with a glare that could have melted solid rock into magma. Then he stomped back over towards me. "Screw me? Screw me? You ungrateful shit," he said as he shoved me. He only used one hand, but there was still enough force behind it to push me back into another machine. Then he stepped in so close that I could smell the spearmint in the gum he was chewing. "You know what you are, Arthur? You're a winner. You expect to be coddled and told how great you are. You think the world owes you kindness because your wife didn't appreciate you, or you weren't as handsome as your brother. Well, boo-hoo." The shocked look on my face didn't slow him down one bit. The composed, professional demeanor that he normally wore like an ostentatious badge of honor was gone. "I am not Naomi," he continued. "I don't give a shit about your feelings. The only thing I care about is the potential that you're wasting because you care more about what everyone thinks than you do about finding out about yourself. I care that you keep getting in your own way because you are too much of a chicken to take control of your life. Your wife screwed another guy and called you names. Get the hell over it. Everyone's self-esteem takes a blow. People get rejected every day. That's life. The winners do something about it. They get back up and work hard to prove those people wrong. The losers? Well, they whine." I was at such a loss for words that my lip trembled with anger. His words ripped through me. Every last one of them was an arrow shot with precision. He looked at me, smirked as if challenging me, and asked, "Which one are, King Arthur? A winner or a winner?" I glared at him with every ounce of venom that I had inside of me. He didn't break eye contact. Instead, he pointed to the treadmill and said, "Get your butt back on that and give me another 20 minutes. I ran like a man possessed. My normal speed was 5.5 miles per hour. I ran at 7 for all 20 minutes. My feet thudded angrily as the whir of the machine tried to keep up with me. My strides were long and fluid. My heart beat so hard that I thought it was going to come out of my chest. But I didn't stop. I was so zoned out that I didn't even know my time was up until the treadmill slowed down and stopped, as if it was conceding defeat. When I finally stepped off, I pushed past Jerry's smug smirk and stomped into the locker room. I was sitting on the bench when I heard him come in. I was hunched over with my elbows planted in my knees, wheezing to catch my breath. Without a word, he sat next to me. We sat in silence for a few moments, besides my lungs desperately fighting for air, before he finally said, "I proposed to my wife 3 times before she accepted. She kept turning me down because she was in love with another man." I looked over at him. There was a vulnerability in his voice that I'd never heard before. At least, not from him. His tough-as-nails demeanor had fallen, at least for the moment. Who was he? He gave me a small snort that could have been a laugh and said, he was her husband. That shook me. I didn't know how to respond. I know it was selfish, but his admission to having a relationship with a married woman offended me on a personal level. Was I supposed to feel sorry for him? He went after another man's wife. Even after he heard my situation, he still had the nerve to feel like the victim? Did he think we had something in common? He must have seen the judgment on my face, because he gave me a small chuckle. He was dead. She was a widow. He said this in a tone of voice that said, "Relax, Arthur." "Oh," was all I could say, wondering why he was sharing this with me. "Believe it or not, that made things even worse," he continued. "No matter what I did, I could never compare to her saint of a husband. He was immortalized in her head. Everything about him was perfect. His shit smelled like roses, they never argued, and he never left the toilet seat up. So essentially, I was in love with a woman who always felt that I didn't measure up. He had a faraway look in his eyes. To say I was surprised by his admission would be an insignificant use of words. He always seemed so much larger than life. Guys like him weren't supposed to have problems, let alone women problems. How did you handle it? He shook his head with tight lips. I suffered for a while. I was constantly trying to prove to her that I was good enough for her to love. I stood by her when she acted like a bitch. I tried to give her space when she needed me to go away, and I made sure to form a relationship with her kids. I was there for her in every way I knew to be. I did all of that, only to have her describe me to her family as a good friend. Ouch, I thought. My face must have mirrored that because he nodded with raised eyebrows, as if he were agreeing with me. His nod said, "Yep, that happened. What kind of woman wouldn't want you? You look like a walking billboard for GNC." I blurted out. He shook his head, like I was missing the point. That's just it, Arthur. Everyone gets rejected. Low self-esteem is often only one heartbreak away, no matter how you look. In fact, good-looking people are often the most insecure. The outside can be changed. You can buy trendy clothes, you can get a haircut, or you can gather up the willpower to get yourself in shape. Those things help boost your confidence, but it's all cosmetic. The problem is, that confidence hinges on how other people see you. There was so much insight in his words that I found myself nodding in agreement. I get that, I said. He patted me on the shoulder. One good thing about going through what I did with Trina was it taught me a lesson. One that I think you could benefit from. He paused to give me a look that told me he was about to say something important. You see, I realized that I shouldn't have to carry the weight of living up to her expectations. If, after everything I did for her, I still wasn't good enough, then she wasn't good enough for me. Her rejection didn't make me less worthy of love. It just meant that she couldn't appreciate what I brought to the table. For the first time, I felt a connection with him that went past teacher and student. He wasn't just a robot whose sole purpose was to beat me into shape. He was a human, a mere man, equipped with all the frailties. But you still married her. Why? I asked, remembering that she was now his wife. A faraway look came across his face. Yeah, we got married, but not for a while. After constantly being rejected by her, I eventually broke it off. I was so heartbroken about it that I took a job nearly 800 miles away. I couldn't stand to be in the same city as her and not share what we had. I had to make a clean break. What changed? His lips curled into a reminiscent smile. She actually chased me down and told me that she wasn't going to live without me. She even offered to leave her job and come to California with me. The fact that she was willing to quit her job and uproot her kids told me a lot about her commitment to our relationship. Of course, we wound up staying here in the end, but I now have a woman who cherishes and respects me. We've been happily married for 5 years. He said this with pride. Wow, was all I could say. But as impressive as his story was, I couldn't relate to it. I couldn't imagine Paige missing me enough to chase me down. While he meant well by sharing his personal triumph, he actually made me feel more disconnected. He must have read my mind, because he decided to make another point. I heard some guy talking about an 80-20 rule that people, could have been Dr. Phil, I don't know, but he said that when a person is getting 80% of their needs met, they stop recognizing it. They look at the 20% that they don't have and with envy. To them, the 80 is always going to be there. It stops being something to be grateful for because it's expected. That 20 becomes so important to them that they often risk the 80 to get it. It's only when the 80 is in danger of leaving that they realize how much it means to them. I knew he was talking about Paige. He felt that I was her 80. He paused for a moment and thought of something. Then he added, "That's also why I am so hard on you. I don't want you to take things for granted. I want you to give me your all and not feel entitled." Yeah, you mentioned that, I said with a brisk laugh. You already have everyone feeling sorry for you. They want to make you feel better. I am not going to join that pity party. My job is to break you out of that and make you see that you aren't this pathetic man who needs his hand held. You have the stuff that matters. That's the stuff that drives you to go to work every day and excel. It makes you visit your kids 3 or 4 times a week, despite getting your butt kicked in the gym by me. What you accomplished with your weight is a testament of the iron determination that you have in there. Your honor and commitment to do your best is what drives you and makes you who you are. Once you stop looking in the mirror through your wife's eyes, you'll see that. He paused, punched me in the arm, and said, "You're King Arthur. Goddamn it, start acting like it." I hit the shower shortly after that. As the warm water streamed down my back and massaged my aching muscles, I thought about my conversation with Jerry. He was right. I spent so much of my life looking at myself from the outside that I used that to judge my worth. People compared me to Lance, so I did too. Paige thought I wasn't worth fighting for, so I agreed with her. It wasn't until I got compliments from other people that I started to feel worthy. At work, I excelled because I could prove it by comparing my work to results. The rest of life isn't that simple. There is no formula to test your worth. You just have to know it, even if everyone else doesn't. I had to get to know who I was on the inside. I had to stop hearing Paige in my head. Her hurtful words still had too much power over me. I was stuck in that moment, watching her having sex with another man. That picture was practically the centerpiece of the space between my ears. I had to move on. No amount of weight loss was going to do that for me. It had to come from within. Hours later. Arthur. Tony Stark may be a billionaire with a super suit of armor, and Captain America may have muscles on top of muscles, but no one screws like you do. The insistent ringing in my ear woke me up from a very satisfying slumber. Initially, it merged into the dream that I was having. My brain finally realized that it didn't belong, and it woke me up. My eyes lazily fell on my window. There was no sunlight shining through, so it was way too early to be my alarm. The sound of the noise finally registered as my cell phone ringing. I groaned in protest as I cursed the interrupter of my forbidden rendezvous with Scarlett Johansson. As Black Widow, of course. My hand sleepily fumbled around my nightstand until I found the wretched device that awakened me. Through eyes that were only half awake, I struggled to see who the caller was. The screen kept auto-rotating on me as I flipped it this way and that to get it right side up. I finally got it to stop and saw that Lance was the culprit. I also saw that it was only 4 a.m. What, Lance? I grunted into the phone. What up, Art? Did I wake you? Stupidest question ever. No, of course not. You know I always wake up at 4 in the morning, anticipating your call. I said sarcastically. Oh, okay. Sorry. He said meekly. However, he didn't hang up. That's when my brain fully kicked in. There was something strange about his voice. His normal, cocky demeanor was not coming through the earpiece. He sounded desperate, almost scared. That got my attention. What's wrong? Everything okay? I asked as I snapped awake and sat up in my bed. My mind raced with possibilities. Was something wrong with him? With Mom? Dad? Was anyone dying? Nothing much. Everything's cool, he said, trying to sound nonchalant. Then offhandedly said, by the way, Julie's pregnant. My forehead furrowed in confusion as I said, who the hell is Julie? Julie. You remember Julie, he said, as if I should have already known who he was talking about. I was still drawing a blank, so he added, you met her on our birthday. It took me a couple of seconds, but a familiar face did appear in my mind. Do you mean that blonde cheerleader? Yep, that's the one. He confirmed with a hint of pride in his voice. She looks so young. You sure she's legal? Of course she's legal age, he said, instantly getting irritated. She's 20. Uh-huh, I said, unconvinced. Did you check her driver's license? No, I didn't, a-hole. But I know she's not underage. She has her own apartment. Could have been emancipated. Kids are doing that now. I retorted. She wasn't emancipated. How would you know? It's not like you ever get to know any of that, you screw. He blew out a frustrated breath. God, I knew calling you would be a mistake. Do you always have to be such a smug, sanctimonious prick about everything? Do you always have to be an irresponsible teenager? I threw back at him. You're 35 knocking up a 20-year-old. Ever heard of protection? You are such a... He choked off whatever angry words were about to come out of his mouth. Then, he took a breath to calm himself. The next time he spoke, his voice was eerily calm. You know what, Art? You need to get over yourself. You're not the end-all, be-all. You always sit up there on your high horse, looking down on me with your smug attitude. You may have been Mom and Dad's favorite, but that doesn't mean that you're perfect. You're the golden boy, the smart and the responsible one. I am the screw-up. I get it. I just wish everyone would shut the hell up about it. Should I have shown him a little sympathy? Probably. But his whining was falling on deaf ears. He had the nerve to say that I was the favorite son. Him, of all people, the one my parents practically worshipped. Poor Lance. His life is so hard. Save it. You can stop with the bullshit about me being the favorite. Everyone knows that you are. Lance, the big-time football star. They still treat you like that. Every time you screw up, Mom and Dad jump through hoops to make sure you're okay. But when my life falls apart, guess what? I am on my own. All I heard growing up was how great you were at football and how handsome you were. I was the one always being compared to you." His response was immediate. "Oh my God, you're so full of shit. Mom and Dad always help me, but the entire time they're doing it I am getting lectured about how I should try to be more like you. I am so sick of hearing that shit. Then, I gotta listen to you martyr yourself, talking about how you're so independent and that no one ever helps you. But you conveniently forget that when your wife cheated on you, it was my couch that you slept on. Every time she tried to contact you, I was the one running interference. As a matter of fact, I am the one who is always there for you whenever you had it rough. Do you know how many fights I got in high school because someone talked shit about you? Do you? No, you don't, because you're a horse's butt. So, please lose me with that self-righteous, nobody is ever there for me crap." I was about to snap back at him. My brain was working on a zinger. But then, I stopped. I stopped because I actually heard what he said. As his words sunk in, an epiphany dawned on me. He was right. He was always there for me. No matter how much we fought, or how much I judged him, he was always the first one that I called when things got rough. I also saw life through his eyes. I saw him having to feel the sting of everyone comparing him to me. My parents bragged about me all the time. I never noticed it because I was so jealous of him growing up. I didn't hear about how proud they were of me because I was always focused on how proud they were of him. To me, he was still the tall, good-looking guy who could get any woman he wanted. He could basically breeze through life with no worries. But when I looked through his eyes, I saw it differently. Ever since he dropped out of college, people were always looking at him as a failure. My parents felt like they had to step in to save him because he was incapable of doing it himself. No one did that for me because they knew that I would be okay. What did that do to his self-esteem? Jerry's words about everyone struggling with it rang true with the person that I thought had all the confidence in the world. Now, here he was calling me a 4 in the morning because he had a baby on the way. He was petrified. He viewed himself as being incapable of taking care of himself because that was the way that we treated him. How was he supposed to take care of a baby? So, he called his twin brother. What did I do? I treated him like a shit. "You're right, Lance," I said in surrender. There was no malice in my voice. No sarcasm. It was just a statement of truth. He wasn't really prepared for me to concede like that, so he was caught off guard. I used his hesitation to elaborate. "You've always been there for me. No matter what I did or said to you, you've always been the guy that I lean on." Thanks," he said, still a little bewildered. I switched gears and asked, "So, how far along is she?" This dropped his guard completely. His voice sounded dejected and small as he said, "A couple of months. She just told me today." "Damn, you two gonna keep it?" "Yeah." The heaviness in that one word was massive. I could hear the turmoil through the earpiece. "How do you feel about that?" There was a pause before he honestly answered. "I am scared shitless, Art. How do I raise a kid? I still live like one. I am not you. Josh and Allie are lucky to have a dad like you. What's my kid gonna think about me?" I remembered thinking those exact words when I found out Paige was pregnant. "Well, Lance, first thing you have to do is stop comparing yourself to me. That's the mistake I always make when it comes to you. Believe it or not, I've always been jealous of you." I could hear his surprised gasp on the other end. "Stop bullshitting me, Art. What the hell are you jealous of me for? You have all your shit together. Especially now that you've lost all that weight." I chuckled to myself at the irony of this conversation. That's just it, Lance. Neither one of us should be jealous of the other person. I am working on changing the areas that I am insecure about. Why can't you? You want to be more responsible? Then be more responsible. You want to be a good dad? Learn what that means and do it. That's easy for you to say. He huffed. "You're right. It is easy to say. It takes a lot of work. But if anyone can do it, you can. You're one of the strongest people I know. I'd bet on you any day." "Really?" he asked, genuinely surprised. "I would. No doubt." What I was saying wasn't bullshit. Lance may have been irresponsible, but I always knew he would outgrow that one day. I had a feeling that day was here. We spent the next 2 hours talking. The longer we did, the more faith I had that he'd be a great father. He didn't approach this situation like he did everything else. He was worried. He was thinking of how his actions would impact this unborn kids. Isn't that what all good fathers worry about? I shared stories of failures that I had with my kids. I hoped it made him feel less alone. Some of the stories we laughed at. Others were a cautionary tale. I did tell him that fate would probably give him a girl as a bit of karma. To his credit, he laughed at that. Through it all, I swore to him that I would be there for him in whatever way he needed. And I meant it. When we hung up, The sun had peeked its head above the horizon and seeped through the blinds in my darkened room. I realized that something had changed in me during that conversation. I grew up a little. I wasn't jealous of my little brother anymore. It wasn't because I realized that he was just as jealous of me as I was of him. It was because I saw myself in a different light. I was the responsible one. I was the smart one. These were attributes that I should have been proud of. These were my 80. I was always insecure because I didn't have that other 20, but I never really needed it. I was fine just the way I was. I dragged myself out of bed and prepared for work. I should have been sleepy, but I wasn't. I felt good, better than I had a while. Life moved along on an even pace. Weeks turned into a couple of months with the seamless ease. It wasn't too fast, but it didn't drag either. It was progress. My outlook wasn't so gloomy anymore. There was one thing that sucked big time. Jerry felt like I didn't need him anymore. My weight loss was so significant at this point that there was no sign of me ever being overweight. But the real reason why he felt like he needed to move on was because I looked at myself differently. My confidence was up, and that was his main goal. When I looked back on our experience together, I saw how calculated his plan was. The digs at my name, the snarky attitude, the boot camp workouts. All of it was to make me stop looking at myself like I was fate's bad joke. Honestly, he was worth every penny of what I should have paid him. During our final bittersweet workout, things with Colleen came to a head. I was doing my routine, and I became distracted when she walked past. He got a knowing look on his face and asked, "You just gonna look at her all night? Or are you gonna go talk to her?" I hadn't even realized that I was staring until he said something. "Sorry, Jerry. I am gonna lift," I said as I grabbed the dumbbells to do some arm curls. I quickly did 10 reps with each arm and put them back on the rack with a loud clank. "Look, Art," he said in a cautious voice. "I am not trying to get in your business, but it's pretty obvious that you want to talk to her. I don't know what happened between you two, but it can't be worth all of this effort that you're putting into pretending that she doesn't exist." I looked around, as if I were afraid someone else was listening. "Am I that obvious?" "You were trying to be subtle," he asked with a snicker. He shook his head at the horrified look I gave him and said, "Just go over there and talk to her." "I can't. Trust me, after what happened between us, she will probably just laugh at me and walk away." He shrugged indifferently. "Well, then don't. Continue to stare at her from across the room, wondering what she's thinking. That's much more effective." Sometimes, I can't stand his smug butt. He smiled and nodded his head to the side, indicating that I needed to get going. I saw Colleen heading to the locker room, so I swallowed my fear and ran to intersect her. "Hey, Colleen." I called out to stop her from going in. She turned towards me, and when she saw that I was the one who called her, she immediately looked uncomfortable and looked at the floor. "Hey, Arthur," she said quickly. Her change in demeanor didn't fill me with confidence. I fought the urge to pretend like I was calling her for some innocuous reason. Still, I couldn't stop myself from using small talk as a segue. How have you been?" I asked with more shyness in my voice than I wanted. "Pretty good," she said, still not looking at me. I gathered up my courage and said, "Listen, I was hoping that we could, talk. I think that we should clear the air about a few things." Okay," she said as she nodded quickly. "When did you want to get together?" I pressed my luck and said, "Are you free now?" "Well, I have to shower first, but we can talk when I come out. Is that okay?" "Yeah, sure. That's cool. I have to shower too." "Okay," she said with a nervous laugh. "See you then." As she disappeared into the locker room, I blew out a breath of relief. As awkward as that little exchange was, I was happy that I got through it. I looked over and saw Jerry talking to Naomi. He gave me a thumbs up and a nod that said that I did good. After we finished showering, Colleen and I went to a Golden Corral that was right down the street. When we got our plates of food and were seated, I struggled for a way to start the conversation that needed to happen. Once again, I made small talk. She entertained it for a minute, but I could see her growing anxious and impatient. I decided that it was now or never, so I took a breath and said, "I invited you here because I want to talk about the night that we almost, She nervously shifted in her seat and shook her head. "I figured, but you don't have to explain to me. It's okay. It's not the first time a man hasn't been attracted to me. I am actually used to it. My husband, ex-husband, wasn't attracted to me either. I'll get over it." I was completely floored. "What?" I blanched. "Yeah." She sighed as she smiled ruefully. His nickname for me was Piggy. Her eyes became lost in her memories. He used to poke my stomach and laugh at me, even in front of his friends. I watched her try to keep it together. As the seconds passed, she gradually disintegrated into tears. She tried to get up and rush off to the bathroom, but I stopped her by reaching across the table and gently grabbing her hands. "Colleen, you have the wrong idea." She looked up in my eyes and my heart broke for her. "Your ex was a retard. I don't know what his problem was, but that's not how I feel at all. I am attracted to you. You are sexy, fun, beautiful. Everything that I could want in a woman. Then why?" I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. Then I told her my story. I told her everything. She listened intently without interrupting one time. When I was done, her reaction stunned me speechless. It was the last thing I expected anyone to do after I just poured my entire heart out to her. She burst out laughing uncontrollably. "What are you laughing at?" I asked, completely horrified. This was what I was afraid of. She covered her mouth to stop herself from laughing, but it didn't work. This time, I got up and was about to leave angrily, but she stopped me. "I am sorry. I am not laughing at you. Please sit down." When I sat down, she said, "I am laughing at us. At this situation. Really? Both of our spouses told us that we were fat, ugly, and bad in bed. Your husband called you a boring too?" She nodded as she tried to stifle another laughing fit. I found myself chuckling, which was a little odd. Colleen burst out laughing even harder at that. "That was a good one," she said between gasping hoots. It seemed so inappropriate that it was infectious. I couldn't help but to start laughing with her. Pretty soon, we were both cracking up so hard that we couldn't even speak. People around us gave us funny looks, but we didn't care. The conversation devolved into an impromptu contest of which spouse said the worst insult. She won, but only because of sheer volume. Her husband had been insulting her for years. At least Paige had the decency to hold her contempt for me a secret until the last minute. "Well, this has been a surprising day," she said as she smiled. "I was afraid that I came on too strong and scared you off. I really liked you, and I didn't want you to look at me like you did. For once, I wanted someone to see me as a sexy woman, even if it was only for one night. So, I pulled out all the stops. When you didn't, I died inside. It was like I was a failure." I smiled back at her. That was what I thought too. I was trying so hard to not be what Paige said I was that I turned out to prove her right. I had to admit that I felt good. Great. Actually, it felt different than when I spilled my guts to Naomi and Jerry. This time, I was speaking to a person who went through the exact same thing that I did. She knew firsthand how it felt to be rejected the way that I did. It made me feel less alone. "So, what do two pathetic losers who are bad in bed do together?" I asked jokingly. "Well, loser, I say we own that shit," she answered. Then she cleared her throat and with mock seriousness said, "Hello, my name is Colleen, and I am a bad lay." "Hi, Colleen," I said, trying to stifle another laughing fit. She snickered and took another sip of her drink. As I sat with her, I was astounded by the kindred spirit that we were. For all of the bad shit that life throws, it can often drop little trinkets along the way. We just have to be open to look for them. Why don't we do this? I said seriously. Let's not try to prove our spouses wrong. Screw them. Instead, we go out again. This time, no pressure, no expectations. We just have fun and try to get to know each other. She smiled brightly. I like that. No pressure, just fun. She took another sip, then out of nowhere said, "And if we happen to screw, then so be it." I almost fell out of my seat when she said that. Surprising, I felt a little excited when she said the word, "screw me." I imagined her lip wrapped around it the way she did on our last date. My soldier's response to that thought was encouraging. I almost breathed a sigh of relief. I thought I was destined for a life of priesthood. The fact that she understood me on more than a surface level allowed me to relax a little. I felt a connection with her that made me feel safe. "Yes, if we happen to have sex," I said as I jokingly crossed my fingers. She giggled and raised her cup of lemonade. We clinked our cups together in toast. Little did we know, there was a familiar face in the background. This face watched me and Colleen as we laughed and conversed with the ease of two people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Had I bothered to turn around, I would have noticed this person. By the time I did turn in that direction, she had already ducked out. But I wouldn't find this out until a few weeks later. Why does Paige have to make everything so goddamned hard? That's what I was thinking as I stood in Paige's bedroom doorway, trying not to strangle her. It seemed like every time I moved past one roadblock in my life, another jumped in its way. I was trying to be patient. I really was. But she was dragging her feet about signing the divorce papers, and it was getting irritating. We had dozens of conversations about it, and each time she brushed it aside like it wasn't important. Her cavalier attitude made me angry. The truth was, I was fed up with being shackled to her. She was the gift that kept on giving headaches. I couldn't even make love to a beautiful woman without her taunts interrupting me. I wanted her gone from my life in the worst way. But like everything else in our existence, this too had to be twisted and turned until it was convenient for her. Screw her. I thought that this was pretty straightforward, Paige. What's the problem? I asked impatiently as she sat in her bed smoothing lotion on her body. This was a new thing that she'd been doing lately when she was getting ready for bed. Didn't matter that I was standing right there. She even had the nerve sit there looking smug, wearing some brand new lingerie that her shithead boyfriend probably bought her. You can't honestly expect me to sign some papers without having a lawyer look them over, she said in a, I can't believe I have to explain this tone of voice. They've been sitting on your dresser for nearly a month now. Your lawyer can't look them over if you don't give them to him. She looked exasperated. I haven't got a lawyer yet, Artie. Okay? When I get one, I'll give them to him. Now please calm down. You'll wake the kids. Come on. Sit down. Take a load off. You look stressed, she said, patting the bed next to her. I was fighting to keep myself from choking her. I looked up at the ceiling and mentally counted to 5. What the hell do you mean you don't have a lawyer yet? She looked at me with surprise. No doubt my demeanor was alarming. I haven't found one yet, she said, eyeing me with a wary look. I wasn't expecting you to simply drop the papers on me. I thought we would at least talk about it before we did anything. I am pretty sure we did all the talking that was needed when you called me a fat, boring loser who was bad in bed. Artie, she said in a whiny voice. I could feel the, why do you keep bringing this up, conversation coming. I was honestly a little tired of talking about it also. It only led to a continuous loop of name-calling and finger-pointing. I wanted to stay on track, so I steered us back on course. So, when do you plan on getting one? Have you even been looking? Instead of answering the questions, she went to her go-to move of turning everything around on me. Why are you suddenly in such a hurry? It didn't seem to matter to you before, she said with her suspicious eyes narrowed at me. Why am I in such a hurry? Are you kidding me? For God's sake, why aren't you? You're the one who wanted this divorce. You're the one who was so disgusted by your fat, boring husband that you went out looking for other men. I am giving you what you want, and now you're purposely making this difficult for me. Why? To her credit, she lost the haughty attitude. Her face softened. I am not trying to make this difficult for you. Her eyes looked genuine. She could have been telling the truth. Even after all we'd been through in this separation, she never intentionally tried to make things difficult for me. In fact, she went out of her way to ease her conscience by trying to make things as easy as possible, considering the circumstances. But she'd lied to me before, and had plenty of success doing it. My faith in her honesty wasn't worth much. Then sign the papers. They're about as fair as I could have made them without ending up on welfare. She hesitated before saying, I just think that we should talk about things before I sign. No, Paige. There's nothing to talk about. I barked as I lost the last bit of my patience. Her mouth snapped shut. I realized that yelling at her wouldn't get me what I wanted, so I took another breath to settle down. Look, I said in a calmer voice, I am not trying to screw you over. Okay, all I am doing now is trying to become a better person and move on. But I can't do that with the weight of our marriage tied around my neck. It's too heavy. I didn't mean to be that honest with her. The words just came out, like they wanted to. I'd been holding everything for so long that all those poisonous feelings became normal for me. But they were deteriorating me from the inside out. When I looked into her eyes, I saw them watering. I am sorry, Artie. I've been really terrible to you, she acknowledged. I didn't jump in to defend her, or try to soften her words any. I just stood there and listened. When she realized that I wasn't saying anything, she asked, Can you ever forgive me? That was a good question. Could I? Would I ever be able to move past that day? Everything in my life seemed to caught in that day's orbit. The gravitational pull was pretty strong. However, I found that I didn't need to forgive her. I didn't need to because I already had. Over time, the pain that I felt that day slowly dissipated. Now, they were nothing more than a few paragraphs in the pages of my history. I do forgive you, Paige. She smiled brightly. Do you really? Yes, I do. Now, I just want to move forward. A look of relief came across her face. That's all I've ever wanted from you. I feel better knowing you forgive me. I felt like we were heading in a good direction. So I said, Good. Now you can sign the papers with a light heart. Her face fell with disappointment. Then, anger flashed as her eyes narrowed. Wait a minute. Are you trying to play me? You're standing there, saying what you think I want to hear to get me to do what you want. I was confused and flabbergasted. What? She got up from the bed and approached me until she was so close I could smell the eucalyptus scent from her lotion. Who is she? She asked accusingly as she glared at me. Who is what? I asked, still confused. I took a step back to create distance, but she closed the space again. The bitch that you've been hanging around with. Colleen. Who is she? A few things ran through my mind simultaneously. First, the question. How does she know about Colleen? Next, the realization. She's jealous. Finally, the indignation. How dare she feel the right to question me? All I could do was laugh, which only made her angrier. Is this funny to you? She asked angrily. Yeah, it is. The fact that you don't feel like a hypocrite asking me about another woman is pretty damn hilarious. She didn't share the humor. Who is she? She repeated, completely ignoring what I pointed out to her. I didn't have to answer her, but I did anyway. She's a woman that I met at the gym. The next words out of her mouth were so ironic that I almost lost my shit completely. With a judgmental sneer, she said, You met her at the gym? Of course you did. Those were the words that I said when we talked about her and Derek. How do you even know about her? I asked, redirecting the attention onto her. Her eyes shifted from side to side, like she'd been caught. I saw you at Golden Corral a few weeks back. You were with a woman, laughing and talking. I wanted to know who she was, so? She paused as if she didn't want to say what came next. With a guilty look on her face, she quickly finished, saying, I went through your phone when you weren't looking. You went through my phone? I gasped incredulously. I felt completely violated. What gave her the right to go through my stuff? She wasn't my wife anymore. Yeah, I saw that you had been texting a woman named Colleen, and I put two and two together. I was about to get self-righteous and lambast her for her invasion of my privacy, but then I remembered that I did my own fair share of snooping. Even though she didn't know about it, the hypocrisy of calling her out on her jealousy was too much for me. Besides that, it was a moot point. I did nothing wrong with Colleen, and I wasn't trying to hide anything. What does it matter? I asked instead. Aren't we separated? One of the provisions was that you get to screw Derek on a daily basis, free and clear. You didn't expect me to stay celibate while you enjoyed the fruits of the single life, did you? Again, anger flashed across her face, but it passed quickly. She must have caught a glimpse of her own hypocrisy. I guess I didn't really think about you with anyone else. She admitted honestly. There was a hint of sadness in her voice. Hearing her acknowledge that should have vindicated me. Instead, it offended me. I huffed sardonically and said, Yeah, you figured that because you didn't want me, no one else could possibly be interested in my fat butt. You're putting words in my mouth, she said defensively. Words that are backed up by your actions. Her natural reaction to argue made her almost say something. Whatever was about to come out was caught at her lips. She took a brief moment to rethink her approach, and in a softer voice confessed, You're right, Artie. I guess I didn't think any other woman would be interested in you. But now, you've lost all that weight and... She didn't finish her sentence, but her message got through loud and clear. When I was fat, she didn't have to worry about me finding someone else. She even felt sorry for me. I remembered all the sympathetic looks on her face when I would have to swallow the bile of watching her moving on. Poor Artie. His fat butt is stuck lonely and miserable while I am having all this fun. But now that she was attracted to me moving on was a problem for her. Well, too bad. It doesn't matter, Paige. You're with Derek. You don't have the right to be jealous. A gloomy shadow cast across her face. It was dark with a bad memory. Derek and I stopped seeing each other a while ago, she said cryptically. She tried to sound blasé, but didn't really pull it off. The look on her face cheated her. There was something else there. Something that she was trying to pretend didn't mean anything to her. I didn't know what to say next. All of the possibilities made me seem like an a-hole. I didn't want to gloat, yet I didn't want to give her false condolences that would come off as sarcastic. I simply settled on asking the million-dollar question. Why? She looked like she wanted to vent, but she held back. Instead, she shrugged her shoulders and said, What can I say? People meet, they have fun, and then it's over. They go their separate ways and move on with their lives. Not everyone is destined to run off into the sunset together. She sighed and sat down on the bed, looking at the floor in front of her. We were supposed to. I said softly. I didn't even realize that I said it aloud until I saw her looking up at me with glistening eyes. Yeah, we were, she said with a sad smile. But, somewhere along the line, we stopped connecting. There was no more laughter, no conversation. Just a series of chores, bills, and jobs. Her voice became froggy as a lone tear slipped down her cheek. Then, I did what I did. Now, everything is messed up. The twins are having a tough time dealing with things, and I'm stuck looking at a photo album wishing that I could go back in time. In the grand scheme of things, Derek was never our problem. Me and Paige were me and Paige's problem. He was just a cough in the face of the cancer that was killing our marriage. I sat on the bed next to her. We both let things slip away from us. But there's nothing we can do about it now. We just have to move forward as best we can. She turned and looked at me. There was something in her eyes that I couldn't decipher. It reminded me of how she used to look at me. Once upon a time. It was like she was looking at me for the first time. She took a deep breath, grabbed the hand closest to her, and said, "I made a mistake giving up on us. On you, Paige." I started to say as I tried to take my hand away, but she held on tight. Her eyes continued to gaze at me, as if trying to look into my soul. I didn't know what was going through her mind. It appeared to be a mixture of thoughts. A series of emotions played out on her face. Then, a determined look settled, like she'd made a decision. Out of nowhere, she grabbed me by the face and kissed me. Her lips were just as soft as I remembered them to be. Her hands, the ones that I used to hold so lovingly, pushed me back on the bed. "Paige, what the hell?" I asked, confused. "Artie, don't speak. Don't say anything. Just do this. With me." A coy smile spread on her face before she slowly bent over and cradled her head between my shoulder and neck. With light nibbles, she began kissing along my skin. I almost did it. I almost gave in. Just when I was about to wrap my arms around her, I saw him. Derek. The omnipresent ghost of our failure. His likeness was a symbol of why she and I were doomed as a couple. "Paige, stop," I said abruptly as I gently pushed her off me. She fell back on the bed. "Artie." "No," I interrupted her as I jumped up like the bed was on fire. "You can't keep doing this to me. I am not your lapdog that comes trotting back because you whistle for after breaking up with your boyfriend. You don't get a do-over because you made a mistake. You threw me away. Just because you have buyer's remorse doesn't mean that you have the right to return the gift that you asked for." She didn't say anything at first. She just sat there, as if thinking. Then, she softly asked, "Do you still love me?" I hesitated to answer. One would have thought that my response would be immediate after she shitted on me like she did. But it turned out to be a little more complicated than I gave it credit for. Taking my hesitation as encouragement, she got up from the bed and walked over to me. Then she grabbed both of my hands and said, "Be honest with yourself. Don't let your pride answer for you." I thought about our entire life together. I saw us going on dates as I courted her, bashfully trying to impress each other. I had a vision of her standing in front of me in her wedding dress, looking like she was missing a set of heavenly wings. In the next flash, we were at the hospital after she gave birth to our twins. She was so beautiful as she lay there, holding one in each arm. I had to admit that I did love that Paige. But in the same thought, I realized that wasn't the Paige that stood before me. This Paige was the one in the shower with another man. This Paige lashed out in anger and cut me so deep that it took an entire year to recover. As much as I loved the former Paige, this one was equally unlovable. But they were the same woman. Funny thing was, I dreamed of this moment for months. I desperately wanted her to see my worth and acknowledge that she wanted me. At one time, this would have made me feel complete. However, things had changed for me. I no longer wanted, or needed, her validation. The old me would have jumped at this. I would have worked hard to be the man that she wanted me to be. I would have always been looking over my shoulder, wondering if she were going to cheat again. My every waking moment would have been trying to ensure that never happened. But the new me realized that I didn't deserve a life like that. Just like her, both of those Arthurs were the same person. Yet, they were as different as two snowflakes. "No, I don't, Paige," I answered honestly. "Not that way. Not anymore." Without realizing it, we'd come full circle. I didn't realize the heaviness that phrase would have until it fell from my mouth. We had officially swapped places from where this story began. The phrase that slammed the door shut in my face had now subjected her to the same fate of rejection. Not that way. It seemed like all the air was taken out of the room. There was just enough for her to gasp, right before tears streamed down her face. She let go of my hands and slowly backed away from me, as if I were an evil monster. When she reached the bed, she sat on the edge and cried. I felt bad for her. I really did. I knew what emotions were running through her. Being rejected sucks big time. I knew that because I was there. "You're lying," she said, as if she couldn't believe what I said. "I know you do." "I am sorry, but I don't," I said softly, trying to make the rejection easier. A lot has happened. Tortured sobs filled the air. I was stuck not knowing what to do. I didn't know if I should hug her to console her, stand there patiently as she went through her emotions, or simply leave the room. In the end, I just stood there. After a few minutes passed, she sniffed and wiped her nose. Then she looked up at me with eyes that were so saddened they were burning with misplaced anger. "You're enjoying this, aren't you?" "What? No." She shook her head and sneered indignantly. "Really? You aren't secretly reveling in putting the bitch who cheated on you in her place? Huh, you're telling me that you don't love this?" How could she even believe that about me? I thought to myself as I watched her spit those words out with the venom of a person who'd been cut deep. I thought a couple of seconds to see if there was any truth to what she was accusing me of, and found that she was partly right. I wasn't enjoying this situation, but I'd be lying if I said that I wasn't feeling a sense of justice. For the longest, it seemed like fate was doing a science experiment by calculating how much shit it could dump on me before I reached my breaking point. Meanwhile, Paige was off in La Land having afternoon sex in the shower. The scales had finally balanced in some cosmic way. "Fine," I said after a few reflective moments of silence fell between us. "You don't have to believe me. So, for the sake of argument, let's say that I was enjoying this. Could you blame me?" She looked like she was about to say something angry, but I raised my hand to cut her off. "Hear me out. You gave up on me, Paige. Instead of giving me a fair shot at improving, you cheated on me and asked for a divorce. Not only that, but you ridiculed and belittled me. But I still stuck by you. I didn't expose you to our kids. I didn't treat you like a pariah or try to rip you off in the divorce. I gave you the separation that you wanted. I stood back while you explored your sexuality with Derek, and I didn't complain. Not even once. Even after all of that, you couldn't find anything about me worth fighting for. But I lose a few pounds, and suddenly, it's not like that," she abruptly interrupted. "It's not about the weight. Yes, I am more attracted to you now, but it's more than that. You're different, more confident. You actually go out and do things. You don't just come into the house and watch TV anymore. This is the you that I've been wanting you to be all along." That last sentence hit me hard. The me she's been wanting me to be. Because the me I wasn't good enough to fight for. She just didn't get it. Honestly, I didn't think she ever would. I could have set off a series of arguments to show her how flawed her selfish logic was. For her to expect me to become who she wanted me to be was so self-centered that it was mind-boggling. I understood that I could have changed some things about me to make her happier. Everyone adapts to living with a spouse. But she didn't give us that chance. Since I wasn't who she wanted me to be, she felt justified in leaving. A part of me wanted to pound some sense into her thick skull, metaphorically, of course. But what was the point? I didn't need her to understand my point of view. This was the first moment in my life that I honestly couldn't have cared less what she thought. I was finally free. "Do us both a favor, Paige," I said with finality. "Sign the papers. Stalling isn't helping either of us." With that, I walked out of the room without turning back. As I descended the stairs, I could hear her crying in my wake. 6 months later, it was done. The papers that I held in my hands were the only proof that I shared a life with Paige. Well, that paper and the 2 kids that were currently arguing over the remote in my living room. "Josh, Allie, don't make me come out there," I yelled from my bedroom. They abruptly stopped yelling at each other. Instead, they continued to bicker in hushed whispers. I sighed sadly and refolded the documents to fit them back into the envelope. No matter how much you get over your ex, the ache of finally being divorced still hits you. It's the closing of a significant chapter in your life. It's as much a painful end as it is a new beginning. My phone vibrated on my nightstand. I found that there was a text message from Colleen. "What you doing, lover?" I chuckled to myself as I typed back, "Thinking of you. Can't wait to see you again." A broad smile spread across my face. My mind flashed back to last night. Colleen and I had finally had sex for the first time. And the second. We've been taking things slow. We went on dates, we hung out at each other's apartments, we went biking together. I even met her kids, as she did mine. Both introductions were informal and fairly casual. The only person who made a big deal about it was Paige. She used the agreement that we settled on in the separation contract. We will keep our extramarital liaisons away from the kids, as grounds for her anger. She was technically right, but we both knew what she was really pissed about. Still, I apologized to her and promised that I wouldn't do anything like that again. At least, until we were fully divorced. And that day was today. "I can't wait to see you either," I typed back as I thought about her wrapped around my body, not even 24 hours ago. I found myself wondering about her ex-husband. Was he insane? How he could tell her that she was boring in bed was beyond me. My cell phone snapped me from my memories. The text said, "Will I see you tonight?" You bet. I thought to myself as I typed my response. I dropped my kids off at Paige's house a little while later. Her puffy-eyed expression when she answered the door let me know that she received the same papers that I did. There was a brief moment of eye contact, but she broke it when the kids started chirping around her, telling her that they were hungry. She gave me a weak smile before she said goodbye and closed the door. I thought about life as I drove to my brother's place. I'd been spending a lot of time with him lately. I knew that Lance was going through a very significant period in his life, and he needed someone to have his back. I wanted to be there for him, just as he'd always been there for me. Today was Julie's baby shower. He wanted to be there for it, but didn't want to be the only man. So, he invited me to come. I considered it part of having his back, so I made a point to move things around so that I would be free to provide some backup. I knocked on the door when I got to his apartment. A few moments later, my mother swung it open with a smile on her face. "Hey, Art," she said brightly as she hugged me and ushered me in. Then she yelled out, "Hey, ladies. It's my other son, the newly single one." A loud cheer went up from the crowd, which made me blush. I hung my coat up, walked through a mass of hungry women, eyeing me up like the last piece of cake. I stepped past them and made my way over to the decorated table that was filled with gifts. I placed mine on it, went to greet the mother-to-be. Julie was sitting on the couch. She waved to me without getting up. "Hi, Art." "Hey, Preggers. How's my nephew?" I asked with a smile. She giggled, like she always did when I called her Preggers. "We don't know what it is yet. It could be your niece." "It's his nephew," Lance interrupted as he brought her a drink of water and sat down next to her. I sat in the armchair next to the couch. "Well, I think it would be fitting karma for Lance to have a daughter," I said, earning me a glare from my twin. I winked at him and laughed. "I will knock your butt out again. Don't think because you went and got in shape that I can't," he jokingly warned as he pointed at me. "Anytime, little bro," I shot back, reminding him that I was technically the older brother. Truth be told, I did sometimes wonder if I could take him now. I think he could sense it. No matter how old you get, you never really lose that juvenile urge to be better than your siblings. Must you two talk to each other like that? For God's sake, you're grown men, and there are women around. My mother chastised us as she walked into the living room with a slice of cake on a paper plate. The two of us rolled our eyes behind her back. The shower was over a few hours later. I was helping my mother clean up while Lance drove Julie home. I looked up and found her watching me curiously. "What?" I asked when it started to become awkward. "Nothing. Nothing at all. There's just something different about you lately. I mean, besides all the weight you lost. You seem, I don't know. I can't explain it. But whatever it is, I like it." "Thanks, Mom," I said. She waved it off. "No need to thank me. I am just an old woman who's proud of her sons." When I first found out that Julie was having Lance's baby, I was so scared for him. I just kept wondering how he was going to raise a child. He's not like you, your father, and I never had to worry about you. We always knew that you would be okay. But him? He always needed us to step in for him. I shook my head. "No, Mom. He never needed you to step in. He needed to find his own way. Lance is gonna be okay. He's stronger than you think." She smiled at me with tears in her eyes. "I know. I can see that now. I am so proud of the both of you." With that, she grabbed he and hugged me close. By the time Lance returned, Mom and I had done all the hard cleaning. I had to leave because my evening was booked. I had a hot date with a very sexy woman. When I sat in my car and started the engine, the setting sun was shining brightly in my eyes. I had to pull my visor down to keep the glare from my eyes. As I did that, I couldn't help but look at the mirror in the visor. The guy looking back at me was me. The real me. The me I'd been all along. I didn't see a man who had lost weight, or who was good-looking. I saw a man who was responsible, loving, smart, hardworking, loyal, and a good father. I saw a man who truly wanted to be a good person and worked hard to achieve that. That was the real man in the mirror. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.